And I would like to call the City Council work session meeting to order. And just a couple things before we start is just to let you know that Councilor Tukalski and Councilor Chenoweth should be on Zoom tonight, and Councilor Payne will hopefully be joining. Not sure. She had a family issue. So I would like to call on City Manager Jeff Towery to introduce the topic and then make opening remarks, and then turning it over to Finance Director Katie Henry.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Let me set the stage for you briefly tonight. For the last several years, the primary focus during our budget season and leading up to it and following it has been to create more financial sustainability, particularly in the general fund, but organization-wide. We've been committed to maintaining service levels as best we can, and also intentionally building an operating reserve and building a reserve for future capital needs. Tonight we'll talk to you about how we got to where we are right now, some of the impacts that we've seen over time, some of the significant drivers that lead us to the place that we are. Katie will lead that primary piece of the presentation. I'll talk about the approach that we have used as we're working towards bringing you a recommended balanced budget a little bit later in the spring, and also close things up. Before we turn it over to Katie, though, I'd like to ask City Attorney David Leitenberg to set a legal context for tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I know that it's been a year since we've done this and that some of you are new to the process. I wanted to describe just a little bit about how the budgeting procedure works. In particular, I wanted to note that the first official event of budget season is statutorily described. This comes out of ORS 294. And before the first noticed meeting with the budget committee, the state is very strict on what can and cannot be discussed. As of that first meeting, when official documents are presented to the budget committee, the public is noticed. The public gets an opportunity to understand that the official state-described budgeting is happening. And then the budget committee here in McMinnville, over the course of successive days, does work on the document that was presented to them, creates a completed document that they then approve and recommend onto the council. The council will receive that budget, will review, and eventually make a determination on it after their own deliberations. The state is also very strict that before that first notice meeting with the budget committee, the government of a local body is limited in what it can do. The reason there being is that the public has the notice, understands that the budgeting is happening, and knows the process as described in statute. So what the Department of Revenue describes as permissible before that meeting and permissible after that meeting they give some general guidelines. In this case, what I want you to understand is that what they say is permissible in a pre-noticed meeting is discussion of vision and goals, spending priorities, or philosophy, high-level generalities. They are very specific that we should not discuss specific estimates or appropriation amounts associated with any fund or line item, the question of whether to fund specific programs or expenditures, or the question of whether to impose any tax levy or the amount of any levy. That, described broadly, once again emphasizes if we're going to talk about recommendations, they have to be kept at a very high philosophical general level. We cannot talk about specifics because this is still prior to the statutorily noticed budget committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So with that in mind, what we will be going on to tonight, and first I need to request that sharing be please turned on for me. Now it is? Okay. So this evening, we will be focusing on through 2025 estimated expenditures, as opposed to looking at anything that is in what the 2026 proposed budget, keeping in mind what David has shared with us today. So with that in mind, let's take a look at our current financial standing. So in order to do this, we're going to start with a very brief review of best practices for municipal budgeting. We're going to set what our baseline is. So where were we at before the ads that we've heard about, before the increase in taxes, before the service charge? How did things look back then? Then we're going to look at what are our operating revenues. What are those monies that come in on an ongoing basis year after year? And then what are the operating expenditures? What goes out year after year? And then, of course, culminating with why is there still a shortfall? Which I believe is the purpose of this meeting today. Why are we here wanting to know why do we need to cut things if we've given more money? So to start with that, the basic concept of a municipal budget is that ongoing expenses need to be fully covered by ongoing revenues. Now this seems straightforward, and we typically consider personnel costs, materials and supplies, ongoing professional services, travel training, rents and leases. Sometimes we overlook recurring expenses that are every 2 or 3 or even 5 years. Replacement of equipment, or sometimes we have contracts that have to renew. You only have to do every 3 years. You have to get a flyby mapping of a certain area in order to update GIS maps, or just a variety of things, but they're still on a recurring basis. When we plan for those things on just an as needed, well, no, these aren't annual, so they don't have to be done with ongoing revenues. That's what starts to get a city behind on keeping things up. Upkeep on equipment and property, and then also non-bond supported debt, so things like interfund debt and things like that. The unrestricted fund balance should be adequate. So what does adequate mean? The minimum according to GFOA. GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. That's my professional association. And they tell us what are best practices for local governments in what we do. The minimum is 2 months of operating costs. The previous council had this information and set a goal of getting up to 2.5 months as a minimum target. Just so you know, that's where we were heading. And the other thing that is important to keep in mind in a municipal budget is that capital planning should be included in the annual budget. So with that, funds should be set aside in a capital reserve that's replenished annually. And a multi-year capital planning with at least a 5-year funding plan is recommended. The city currently does not have a CIP, but we're in the process of working on that, and we're aware of current needs for our facilities because of the 2019 facilities condition assessment that was performed. And so there are current needs that are capital in nature, in the sense that they are larger projects that are not recurring and they go into capitalized accounts, but they still need to be funded, and we have several projects that need to be done. So before we dive into any of the specifics on the numbers, I want to make sure that you understand what we need to have, and that the baseline fund balance that we're starting with, it meets those minimum requirements, that 2 months, and this is before heading into 25. But likely financial difficulties because it's there, but there's not that capital plan, there's not those reserves set aside, and it is at that very minimum amount. So before I dive into details, any questions for me?
So in your details, you're going to tell us what 2 months reserve is for the city and what
It depends on what the operating expenses are.
you're going to average it for us?
So,
So we have an idea what that number should
so
be?
it's about 4.5 million.
Okay.
But again, it depends based on what we have to cut and all of those things, so. So let's talk about in fiscal year '22. So that is July 1st of '21 through June 30th of '22. What was the composition of our revenues back then? The reason I put this type of a graph is for you to see what are the main drivers. We're going to zero in on some of these. And if you look at property tax, franchise fees, and state shared revenues, those are really three-fourths of our revenues, and those are our drivers. Grants come and go. As you know, in '22, we're just coming out of COVID. We've got, ARPA funds kind of make the graphs go wonky. So I'm not pulling those in. We want to really look at what is ongoing. And so if we take a look at those, that 3/4, that 75% of our revenues, that's going to give us what our drivers are. Here, this graph, we're looking year over year. And you'll see throughout these slides that what I'm doing is I'm comparing to a 3% increase over where we started in '21 up to 2025. And so on this slide, you see 2025 revenues without the 50-cent ad and without fire. So what I've done is I've taken out these variables to bring everything down so we are comparing apples to apples to apples. So we have our franchise fees that were already in place. We have our state allocation. The dark green on this is our state allocation. You will notice that dark green is not getting bigger. In fact, if we were to look at the specific numbers, it's getting a little bit smaller. Our state allocations are not growing. People are smoking less, they're drinking less, they're starting to take care of themselves, which means they're paying less in the vice taxes, as we call them. But all in all, as a whole, with this 75%, we are increasing right at that 3%. We've added revenues. This is the argument that has come up. We've added revenues. We added a service charge. So if we go to 2024, this has added 2.2 million to that base. We've added the 50 cent per thousand in valuation in property taxes. That adds 1.6 million to our base in 2025. So the added revenues for 2025 are 3.8 million. And when I say added, like I said, everything has to have a point of reference. So in order to compare everything together, I'm taking what have we added over and above that 3% line. So that's what I'm comparing to. So 3.8 million is what we've added. And I believe the question to be, if we've added that, how did we use that up and now need what is proposed to be 3 million more? So that is what I'm proposing to answer next. Any questions on the revenue side, or are we all on the same page for revenue?
So this is for budget ending 2025,
That's correct.
and you're going to give us what the end revenue will be for this coming year?
So we can get into it, the budgeted revenue. Yes, we have the budgeted revenue.
Okay, because the pilot fee went up as well, I believe, for this budget year? This coming budget
A
year?
very small amount.
3%? From 3% to 6%, I believe.
So
For this coming budget year, I believe. Jeff, can you answer that?
I actually think that increase was already captured in the previous years. I don't think we saw the increase in the current fiscal year. We'll double check on that.
I think we should check that.
So the pilot is a small amount that is within this franchise and pilot, this lighter green down here. And so I considered them together, just so you know. We can look up the details on that. But it is considered, we've considered it in here, and it is below this line with the 3% increase. So why is there a problem? Let's talk about salaries real quick. Here we have in the blue line, the 3% line. You have 21 and 22 that are going up at that 3%, and then you have a jump up in 23, 24, and 25. And you might want to say that we've added a bunch of people. If you look at the approved FTE, you can see the general fund total has actually not gone up. As a total, it has gone down. So that is not the explanation for the increase in salaries. There was, however, a compensation study, and that may be the wrong word to use, but there was something that was done to compensation in 23 where the salaries were realigned, and Jeff can speak to that possibly more if needed. But there was an increase in base salaries to bring everyone in line, I believe it was with market, which did have an increase in 2023. And then there are also increases of different steps. So if we were to hire new employees every year and were to always stay at the lower step, that 3% would keep pace with inflation. But that's not how it works when people go through. They promote up, they move up through the steps, especially in a government. We have ranges and steps. The employees start at the beginning of the schedule and they move up through it. And then they also have longevity after they've stayed a while. The city of McMinnville has been very fortunate to have employees who have stayed with us, who have been with the city for many years, and several have gone through, are at the higher steps on their range, and are also eligible for this longevity, additional amount for longevity. And that has allowed us to really keep a lean base of employees, but it does mean that those salaries do go up because they are employees with seniority and with a lot of time. So that's what we're seeing on the salary side. On the benefits side, you see that we have that 3% line again, and it does start to go up. So when I was looking at this, I wanted to know, okay, why are we starting to see the benefits go up? We haven't added people. What is happening with our benefits that we're starting to see this escalation? And so I took a look at the different types of benefits to see if there are things in here that we have control over or if there are things that are outside of our control. And the biggest driver is this PERS amount as far as benefits go. And I want to make sure that there's an understanding of, especially our newer council members, but also of everyone, that this PERS is not something that we have the option of just sharing with the employees or of deciding we want to pay it or we don't want to pay it. It's not like a 401k that we can just adjust. It's a state system, and a lot of the payments are related to liabilities that are there and are shared throughout all the governments in the state. And as such, what what we have to pay is what we have to pay. The city has taken steps to lower that by having a side account, and as is doing what we can to lower that, but that is something that we are faced with. The medical increases are happening in the market, and it's a tough market, and those increases are being seen by everyone. And the others are just a function of salaries. But really, there isn't a lot besides it is what it is, which isn't a very deep explanation. It is simply what we are seeing in the numbers is really telling us exactly what we're seeing in the marketplace and in government right now. Materials and services has a larger increase over that 3% line, but the amounts are less because so much of our budget is in personnel. So the amount that's above that 3% is 2.1 million. So the question is, can we just stop buying pencils? No. The issue isn't these smaller amounts, and a lot of people, when I get to this point in a budget presentation, start to want to look at details. Well, maybe if we didn't go to this conference or that conference, or maybe if we cut travel, or for one entity, it would make it, one department, it would make a difference. And so I wanted to break this down and see what are the drivers of that. So here, what we have is the breakdown of that 2.1 million in the different types of costs. What is it that is over and above just that usual 3%? So parks and facilities maintenance. Does someone have their hand up?
Counselor Chenoweth. Can we interrupt for just a moment for a question? Chris?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This goes back kind of quite a ways into this, but you keep referencing a 3% line. Why 3%?
So 3% because 3% is the amount that property taxes are allowed to go up in, according to Measure 5 and Measure 50, property taxes can go up 3%. So that is the baseline of the largest of our revenues. If everything stays stable, we know we have that 3% increase in property taxes. It's also...
But doesn't that assume no growth?
That would assume no growth. We are in a period of very slow growth. I believe Heather could speak to that if needed. It does vary with growth. We also have other revenues that are decreasing. Like as I spoke of earlier, we have our state shared revenue that is on a decline, which is why I put them together in the graph that I was showing with the revenues.
Did you calculate what our actual average increase has been per year?
Average increase of what? There are a lot of different...
Of revenue, based on what the actual percentage average increase per year has been.
So that's what I'm showing you in this graph, this 3%. Is over the period of time, that 3% line.
I think he was wondering if you actually calculated it to know if it was above or below, above the 3%, or just assuming.
So let me try to take a crack at this a different way. Counselor, the data in the bars, the colored bars, are the actual data from those given years, plus the forecast data for the last year. And the line across the top is what shows the 3.5% growth for those aggregate revenues. So yes, we have actual numbers for property taxes, franchise and pilot, and our state shared revenues. That's what's represented on this graph.
So that bar is basically, I can't remember, it's the straight line bar you would create across a graph to show what the average actually has been.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so even though projected, the idea here is we should be actually getting closer to 3.5% to 4% a year. We're because of when you add in the function of growth, what we're actually realizing is the 3%.
This is with those sources combined, not just property taxes. Property taxes are higher. Property taxes for several of the years were at 5%, 4.5% growth. I'm not denying that. I did calculate those. What I'm doing here is adding in the franchise fees and the state shared revenues, because rather than showing the decrease in state shared revenues and the increase in property taxes, I didn't feel that that was the detail that we were looking for. It was rather what was the stable state before, and then what was causing us to be outside of that stable state.
So it would be fair of me to say that Measure 5 and Measure 50, while limiting our property taxes, are not really holding us at 3%. It's other drivers that have pushed us down below what the property tax limitations were.
As we've discussed previously in our one-on-ones, I will disagree with you, but would prefer to not do that in this public meeting. That's where I'll leave that question.
I don't remember that part of our discussion, but okay, perfect. Thank you.
So to recap, we were at...
Sorry, Katie, before you go on,
Sure.
can you go back to the slide with the actual staffing? That one, thank you. Thanks, I just wanted to screen capture it. We're good.
Okay.
Oh.
And you will get this presentation tomorrow. So remember, we were at the 3.8 million. We had said from the added annual revenue, the 3.8 million. So the salaries have added 2.4 million. The benefits have added 1.1 million. The materials and services have added 2.1 million. Just so that if you're tracking along, you can see where we're heading with this. So, we were at materials and services, and what is making this up? So we have a couple of large pie pieces here. Parks and facilities maintenance is one of them. We have a parks plan, I believe, and Geoff could speak more to that, that was put in place that involved taking better care of all of the various parks that we have. Facilities maintenance is something that, like we talked before, has been deferred for many years, and a new emphasis is needing to be put on it. And we've brought on an individual to work in facilities. Sorry, I can't remember if he was brought on in 24 or 25, but is now in there in facilities. Is not part of this number because we're talking about M&S, not salaries. But we have additional professional services. We also have seen a large increase in the chemicals that have to be used for maintenance and in a lot of the products that we use. So those have increased higher than your normal increases that we've seen in inflation. Then we have computer and software.
Second, Katie.
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Does this number include any ARPA-related costs we're spending on things that would
Good
be filed
question.
under that, or?
Good question. No.
Okay.
No. So I've removed from these numbers the ARPA revenues and the related expenses.
Thank you.
On the computer and software piece, these are expenses that are for beefing up various departments. So the police department is one that has some larger expenses. We have replaced some vehicles, and each vehicle has computers in them. There are specific requirements that computers have to have according to CGIS. And so there is money in the budget to get all of those replaced. You also know that we had a grant for bulletproof vests, and not bulletproof vests, for the cameras that go in the vehicles and the vests. So it's great to have a grant when those start out, but you do have to continue the operations of those. So those will continue into the future. And then we also have a large amount of computers in the library that are used. We have also a transition from a fully in-office staff to a more mobile staff, and so the transition from station regular computers to laptop computers, which has been extremely helpful for the work, but there is a difference in cost that is seen. So, and there's also the fact that when we look back at 22, as we're comparing, there are several larger softwares that we didn't have. And so there's been some push from council and budget committee to get better software. Transparency requires a better software. There's been talk of the court software. There's NeoGov software. A lot of these softwares were not there. We were just working with the basics and, a lot of paper and things like that. Adding in software really helps with efficiencies. It really helps with transparency, but it's also expensive. So that's that quarter of the pie there is computers and software. Another larger piece is property and liability insurance. And I have a meeting coming up with our insurer who wanted me to let you know that that is going to go up even more. I don't have a number yet, but it was a cautionary statement that it is likely to go up more. Partly because of the age of our buildings and the lack of maintenance on them. Any claim, the claims are actually what increase the insurance, and they are now doing, they come by and have to do an inventory and an assessment themselves of the various buildings, which is not something that they have done in the past on as regular of a basis as they're doing. So they will be doing a walkthrough and coming to talk with us very soon on that. The other items are fairly small. You can see what they are. I did want to point out the service fee billing costs, so that the 2.2 million is the gross, and then they take off that 0.15, so 150,000 is the cost for it being billed out. So it would just have to be netted against that. Any questions on the M&S or anything else you want me to go over on these?
Mayor, let me add one thing. I think there's a temptation to say, well, we're just buying more stuff the last 3 years. And to some extent, that is true. As the staffing stays fairly lean, we rely more on tools that support the employees who are here. But also remind you that 2 years ago we were nationally in a place of very high inflation, and what happened is that inflationary cost drove a lot of our costs, and most of those costs, frankly, have not gone down, even though inflation has moderated substantially over the last 2 years. So we see a spike in goods and to some extent services that has continued to be part of that growth curve.
If I could really quick, Mayor.
Councilor
This is
Chenoweth?
Councilor Chenoweth.
Go ahead.
I put it in the chat, but the pilot increase was on April 26, 2022, Resolution 2022-19, and it took effect on July 1st of 2022.
So the industrial class, though, of the pilot went from 4.5% to 6% in 2024. Two different kinds of pilots for the power. But thanks, Chris. Director Henry, do you want to continue?
So to recap, the property taxes cover property taxes, and I should have changed this slide. Thank you for pointing that out, Councilmember Chenoweth. Property taxes plus state shared revenue cover 3% per year increase. The new revenue covers 3.8 million. Steady state personnel, including vacancies, and this becomes important when we talk about upcoming cuts, is the number of vacancies that we have had. Uses the 2.4 plus 1.1, which equals 3.5 million, and increases faster than 3% per year. So keeping in mind that we're not yet looking at 26, so we're just looking in 25. So when you increase that up, it uses up all of that new revenue when we look into the future, from the 3.5 to the 3.8. The current service level in M&S uses 2.1 million over and above the base level, and also increases faster than 3% per year. So between what we have already there, that requires a cut of 2.3 million. So we've used up the new revenue. We now have a new cut of 2.3 million. But we were told 3 million, not 2.3, we were told 3. Well, building maintenance has been deferred for several years and no funds are being set aside for it. If we don't start to look at a facilities plan, they will become unsafe and unusable, and we'll be talking about shutting down programs that have revenues coming in, that are helping out our citizens. And so this other piece to the plan is to be able to begin starting to set aside money to do some of these critical capital programs. And so, capital projects, excuse me. So an additional 0.7 million cuts is recommended, cuts in operating things is recommended in order to be able to begin setting aside money to bring the total cuts to 3 million. That's, if we're looking at where we are in 25, that's how the recommended 3 million comes up. Before we look at any requests or anything like that on 26, that's where that $3 million number comes from. So the bottom line from the numbers is to keep the city operating well into the future, we have to bring our operating or our ongoing revenues in line with our ongoing expenses. If we don't have additional revenues, we have to reduce services in order to keep those in line with each other because the lines are not going up at the same rate. Any questions for me on the specific data that's been given?
So are we done with this last budget that is ending? Because I have a question about it. The current budget year that we're in right now. Is now the time to ask?
Sure.
Okay. So I just want to clarify that the last year's budget was approved in a deficit with money taking out of reserves to balance it. Is that correct?
So, yes, the 2025 budget was approved so that the beginning balance for 2025 was higher than the ending balance. It was budgeted to use fund balance to decrease that fund balance in order to operate for fiscal year 25.
And so that took how much out of our unrestricted funds? Is it 4.5?
No, that would have used up the whole fund
Whole thing.
balance. We would never, I believe it was $1.5 million, and I'm speaking completely from memory, so I will have to look that
Okay.
up.
I don't remember that being part of the discussions a year ago.
So if I went back and looked at budget, I was here in the audience, but I think what happened is there was a approved budget by the budget committee, and then the council made some directions on some changes, and tell me if I'm wrong, to hire a position, a planner, I believe. Planning manager, and used a vacancy of the code compliance for that, and then had some other changes that took it into a need for the reserves. Is that correct?
Yes, that's part of what happened.
Okay. So just kind of wondering if the council understood that it went into a deficit, which is,
No, I didn't.
We can go back and recreate that specific information for you.
okay, I pulled it. But that would be
Mayor
great to
Morris, may I
share.
ask a question?
Counselor Tukolsky?
What kind of a deliverable can we expect to receive from you, City Manager Tower, to explain that deficit?
Explain
Explain why we're deficit spending, essentially.
but the last year's budget, I just want to make sure I understand what you're
Right.
asking.
From last year, not this year.
So I think what happened at that council meeting is what he's asking.
It's not just the council meeting. We'll show you the budget that was approved by the budget committee also utilized reserves. And so it wasn't as simple, it wasn't driven by one position or a single decision.
Yeah.
But,
there's
well, we
7
can
things on
provide
here.
that information to you.
You'll get that to you, Counselor Tukolsky? Anybody up here have a question right now? Okay, so I would like to have a little bit more detail on that.
Sure,
And how it was communicated to the last year's council and budget.
sure, we can certainly do that.
I do have a question.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Wasn't there also 1.2 million transitionary one-time costs for transitioning the fire department to a fire district that is no longer part of our required budget?
That is correct, and that has not been included in any of these ongoing costs. That affected the fund balance and the reserves. But the discussion that we've had is about ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses, so that was not included in any of these, in anything that was shown you as far as the total amount of M&S or any of those.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your slide. It's just super concerning to me to think that we've gotten an increase of about for this year, and we're a $3 million deficit, along with the increase would make it closer to a $7 million deficit that we went into this year. So I appreciate your slides. I need to look at them a little harder to understand it, but it certainly puts us in a bad place with a $3 million deficit after already getting our increases in revenues. So
Mayor,
super
if I
concerning.
may, I absolutely agree with you. It's kind of mind-boggling how we could have all of the increases we've had, and we're still sitting in a $3 million hole. Is just, it's difficult to grapple with.
I'm wondering, how do we do, and again, new to this, so I'd like just get some guidance as to forecasting. Would we have seen any of this in the fall versus now that we're almost in April? I don't know how we look at that, and I know, Director Henry, you're new to this. You're here about the same time as me. So I don't know how that process goes. Could you share with me?
We have,
Harry?
this was part of the conversation around the new budget software. We have really limited forecasting capability, and it has not been easy to do that because it requires a lot of handwork. I understand what you're asking for. I think the information is there. We were asked to talk about the primary drivers and the expense and the revenue curves, which has been the focus of this presentation. So just give us a chance to bring that information back. I'm confident that we can provide that to you.
Okay. And I just want to clarify that the current deficit of $3 million is not based on any asks. So no departments were asked if they needed anything additional. It's strictly on the base level that was provided last year.
Yeah, so that's kind of the next part of the conversation. So I don't want to forestall any other questions that council may have, but I can start to get into that whenever you're ready.
Okay, let me just make sure, do any counselors have any additional questions at this time? Counselor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that the part of the 3 million is the increased set-asides for capital construction, right?
That is correct.
Right. And how much is that set aside? I saw one number was 700,000, but I thought it was more like $1 million.
So again, remembering that we're looking at 2025 numbers with everything then increasing as we head into the next year with increased property taxes and things like that. So as we're looking at 2025, we're looking at 700,000. When I'm doing a budget, I look in the millions, in the points of millions. So 3 million for there is where we're at with $1 million for capital, 2 million for operating. Those are the gross numbers. To get exactly to 3 million, it makes it 700,000 when I start whittling away and breaking everything down into those little pieces. So that's why it's the 700 versus the million.
Thank you. And then just to follow up before Councilor Cunningham, so to clarify, that's actually an increase in service level from nothing to 1,700,000 for capital construction, right?
It is moving around service levels from things that the public may see as hours that doors are open,
Right.
and programs that are offered, to some of the essential items that are needed in order to fix the facilities to be able to continue on. So it's visible services versus the less visible services.
So it's a reduction in service level for public-facing services.
That's correct.
And an increase in service level for capital construction, essentially.
Correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Cunningham?
Just because I know this will be a part of the conversation, the original reason for this city services fee of the 1.8 that ultimately is 2.2 was to cover a similar deficit. But that obviously that deficit continues on, so that, like, in essence, it wasn't a one-time thing that was going to be paid down and then we would get that money back, in essence. So, like, just like this is right now a $3 million deficit, this is a $3 million deficit that will carry on, in essence.
And grow.
from here on.
The other thing that I would add to that is that when the council took that action, even at the time, we were not certain that that number would completely provide financial stability. But the council and budget committee wanted to see what progress we made. There were other revenue issues that were identified 4 or 5 years ago that have essentially been paused. And so the council and budget committee have taken kind of an incremental approach to, let's try this thing, let's see how it works. Let's try this thing, let's see how it works. And so that's been part of the dynamic.
So in essence, we are now if we were to look back at that point when we instituted the city services fee, we're now coming close to a $5 million deficit? Roughly. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Thank you, Mayor. One question I would have is in your 2025 projections, the decision was made to go to $1 instead of a 50 cents recovery. Are you including that in those projections?
For the 25?
The 25 is the current year we're in.
Or for the next, so that, we don't see that yet.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Number two, I just want to make 2 comments. One, the damage that's being wreaked by PERS, tier 1 across the system needs to be understood by all that listen to this meeting and are involved in local policy. What PERS is doing to us and will continue to do to us till 2035 is it's forcing us to either cut services or increase taxation on our people to pay the retirement of those that are going to retirement in tier 1. That's hurting us, and it's hurting us badly. And it's unfortunate that a step hasn't been taken to resolve that by them. Second, I just want to make it really clear in case I came off wrong. I really appreciated my one-on-one with you, Katie. What you've provided here is excellent. Thank you so much. And my back and forth with you over the apparent disagreement between about 5 and 50, notwithstanding, that was not meant to indicate any distrust or dislike of the work you're providing. You're doing an excellent job. So thank you very much. And I just want to make that really clear and put that on the record.
Thank you very much.
Counselor Tukalski?
Yeah, so thank you, and I want to echo the comments of Councilor Chenoweth on this one because Director Henry, I think you're doing a great job. But moving into this, we have a positive 3.8 million in revenue coming from basically the fire department moving to a fire district. It's essentially a fee on the people. I find that part of it challenging because if we still had the fire department in our, I'll just say in our budget, I don't know where we would be otherwise. It's challenging to blame software or the lack thereof when we have, as a city, been incorporated since 1876. And we've been able to balance the budget and build a thriving city for so many years. I have a hard time saying that because we didn't have software, we didn't know that we were spending into a deficit or we didn't know that we had money. And now all of a sudden we have software and things are going to be better because we know where we're at. I don't understand how that's going to work. So that's part of my question. Another part of the question that I have is people working from home right now. Why haven't we had our people come back to the office? If it costs more to have them working from home, why have we not, as a city, said, open your doors, provide a service level, and let's go ahead and bring people back to the office? Many private businesses have done so. Why haven't we done that? The other question that I had is we keep talking about in order to keep the city operating well into the future, and that's a quote. I'd argue that a lot of people say that we're not operating super well, and that makes it a challenge because we're not providing some of the services that people want. We're not providing the safety that people want. And I don't think that there's a lot of people that think our city is operating well. I think our city is operating well as it can be right now. But the problem is that I'm very passionate about this. I'm sorry. We have a lot of people that are asking for more, but we only have so much we can work from. So I guess how is the software going to help? Why is it that we are still spending into a deficit when we don't have the fire department anymore? And if anybody can answer that, I'd love to hear it.
I'll try to answer a couple of those questions. I didn't blame software. I was asked a specific question about our ability to forecast, and our ability to forecast has frankly been limited by the tools that we have. The city started deficit spending 15 years ago. This isn't new. The city started spending down a 42% reserve 15 years ago and has consistently spent that down over more than a decade. And we're done. We don't have any more of that to spend. It's gone. And I mean, frankly, Kent Taylor forecast this in 2012 in an article in the Oregonian. This is not a new conversation. What is new is that now that the reserve is gone over the last 15 years, we don't have the luxury to simply spend that reserve down and maintain our outwardly facing services. That's the harsh reality. Where we would be if we still had the fire department, we'd be looking at a $6 million draw on a discretionary general fund in addition to what you have now. Things would not be better, things would be worse, because we wouldn't have any more tax authority than we have now. We're not exercising that full tax authority, but the delta is less than a third of what the fire department cost the general fund in a given year. So I hope that answers a couple of the issues that you raised.
Councilor Tukalski.
I'm just personally troubled by all of this, and I'm going to be quiet and listen for a bit. Thank you.
Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I agree with Councilor Tukalski that it can be difficult to kind of wrap your head around what we're looking at, but I'm trying to do that. And I just want to make sure I have an understanding, a clear understanding of the drivers that you presented as I've kind of assimilated them. So about 1 million is increases in employee compensation and employee insurance costs, over and above what we had previously been spending. And then 500,000 approximately PERS costs, and then about 700,000 capital construction. So that's 2.2 million. Are those numbers, round figures, pretty close to the main drivers?
Yes, absolutely.
So hopefully, Councilor Tukalski, that answers your question of the difference, where that difference is coming from, because it seems like it's primarily being driven by those three specific areas: the decision to stop failing to invest in our buildings, which we haven't done for the entire time I've been on council. We did a 2019 study that gave a very damning analysis of our building condition. And for a period of many years, we preferred to continue to maintain the outward-facing service level. And right now, we're at a place where we need to start investing in those buildings. And so that is a change in service level, and to do that without increasing revenue is just not possible. The second thing I wanted to hit on was to follow up on Councilor Chenoweth's comments about PERS costs. And this is a question for Katie. Is it accurate that the Tier 1 PERS expense, the unreimbursed PERS expense, is about 28% of all employee costs? And then the second part of that question is, my understanding is this, and Councilor Chenoweth mentioned 2035. My understanding is that they've amortized the debt for PERS. And so I'm not sure if 2035 is still the date when we see those numbers fall off a bit. And so I was wondering first if that first number was more or less correct, and second, if we're actually going to see that improvement in 2035, or would it be later?
So as far as the percentage that PERS 1 is of the other ones, I can't speak to. I honestly don't know what Tier 1 is versus Tier 2 and OPSRP. I honestly don't know. So I can't speak to that. As far as the 2035, we have a side account and we have some debt. There are two pieces to our PERS. And in 2035, there is a piece that falls off. And so there is a decline that's coming up. As far as the overall and total, I would have to investigate that to come back with specific solid numbers on it, just because I haven't gone deep into it. Yeah, I would have to come back with that.
Thank you. I don't need further analysis on
Okay.
that last point. It's fairly minor, but I think it does reinforce what Councilor Chenoweth was saying about the impact of
Oh,
the tier one on our budget.
could I add a point?
Absolutely.
So sort of to answer or to address the question of how did we get here and why is this happening? I've been a finance director in other cities, and I've led trainings with GFOA across the country and in Oregon Finance Officers Association. And the issue facing Oregon cities is one that's been talked about for a long time. And McMinnville is seeing it a little bit later than the other cities, likely because of what Jeff has described about having that fund balance that's been drawn down. But this has been something that's been talked about in our professional organizations for a long time about what are the Oregon cities going to do when this happens. And so these cuts have been happening, and they are happening in cities across the state because the revenues simply are not keeping pace with what the needs are of the cities. So it is drastic, it is painful, but it isn't just McMinnville. It is really an Oregon statewide issue that we're facing. And one other thing that I want to point out, since I have the microphone, is that I am an avid believer in financial forecasting, and however long it takes to get the software going and whatever it takes, I will use Excel and my brain, and we will get financial forecasts out there and we will work with them. I appreciate that we have new software coming in, and we are working on that. We have another meeting tomorrow to work on how to best get that out for you all. But we will be seeing forecasts coming out. That is my commitment to you.
I appreciate that. And I agree with the other counselors that you're doing a great job. And I appreciate the fact that you're here and can answer these questions. I just want to make one comment, Jeff, in regards to your thought process or your comment about seeing this decline over years. That, to me, in a way, is a little bit of a forecasting to see that we're going to need to spend our debt, which I would have, again, not being here on the dais, I would have no input into that except for speaking to budget. But just seeing that and being concerned to agree to spend over a balanced budget, knowing that we don't have enough money to sustain us. So I know you're not in control of all that. They have a council and budget committee, but that's just a comment that I want to say in regards to that and forecasting. I know we need to move on to the current year.
Councilor Tukalski has a question.
Councilor Tukalski, you're back.
Thank you, Director Towery. Director Henry, you said that most of the cities in Oregon are facing the same kind of cuts and the same kind of challenges financially. I completely understand that. How is it that other cities are dealing with these challenges, and how, I mean, we continue to tax and fee our people so much right now. We have city service fees, we have utility taxes, we have the $1.50, we have the 50 cents that came in previously. We can continue to add taxes where it makes it a challenge for people to live and pay their bills. And there are people that are struggling. There are people that are not struggling. I'd say more are struggling than less. And how are other cities dealing with this financial challenge and not just adding more and more fees and taxes to their people? What else are they doing? I don't think you can answer that right now. It's a big question, but I'd like to know what other solutions are out there.
I can give you two brief comments on that, and we can come back with a larger
Thank you.
answer. The brief response is twofold. One is service fees. Our amounts are relatively small compared to some sistering communities. And the other is you will see cities around with very large cuts in the upcoming years, 26 and 27. Very significant cuts are going to be seen in budgets around the state.
Okay. And I know that we're not discussing specifics here, but I think that cuts to the essential services and cuts to the, I would say, customer-facing, taxpayer-facing services are not what we want to consider, but that's a different conversation this time. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Counselor Cunningham?
Just a note, last year I did some research on the city services fee, looked at several of the communities, and one of them being the city of Newburgh, and I believe this number is now out of date. City of Newburgh last year was a city services fee of $27.39. That's more than double our current. So I think that is a major way that they are dealing with some of that. And you can look at cities like Gresham that are substantially more. Independence just instituted a $27 city services fee. So I think that is some of how they're handling it.
I think we just also need to keep in mind that everybody's tax levy is a little different, so kind of looking at the combined income instead of just comparing service fee to service fee, but thank you for that information. Counselor Peralta?
Yeah, thank you. And the other answer I would say is that a lot of cities, including McMinnville, defer maintenance on their buildings. And that's problematic at a certain point for every city. And right now, I feel like that, with at least 2 buildings that are leaking on the inside in ways that are really depreciate the public's experience of them, I think we've just taken as much as we can in terms of deferred maintenance. So we're having to address those costs at a time when we're trying to address these other drivers. It just creates a secondary challenge because we can't avoid those costs anymore.
Counselor
Tukalski, did you have one more comment before I move on?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilor Peralta, or Council President Peralta, do you have any idea how long we've been deferring that maintenance?
Thank you, Councilor Tukalski. I mean, City Manager Towery said at least 15 years. I would guess in some cases it's considerably longer than that.
15 years, okay.
Or more.
So through the times that were not as challenging as now and not 11% inflation in some areas or whatever number you want to use, because that's a crazy number. It seems as though we had the opportunity to maybe continue to maintain our buildings, but we've not selected to do so. And Councilor Cunningham, you did cite other cities as having higher service fees. And I can understand that there is a tax differential there that we haven't talked about. But regardless, when people have to pay their tax bill or their utility bill or their MAC water and light bill, I mean, it's a real thing. So whether or not the fee is $13 or $23 or $33, regardless, they still have to pay the thing. So it's a challenge for some folks. So I don't want to discount those challenges.
I totally agree. I think the issue being, though, is that many cities, just like Director Henry said, are dealing with these shortfalls. And we're hearing 30 million in Salem and 13.8 million in the Beaverton School District. I mean, it's everywhere.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes or so. Did you have something for this year's budget?
I have, yes, I have. So, and I guess the other thing that I would say is that the frustration that many of you are reflecting is the exact same frustration we have at the staff level. None of us are happy about this work. None of us are thrilled to bring this story forward to you in a more sort of pointed way than maybe we have done in the past. It's a really challenging time. We live and work here too, for the most part, and so we absolutely understand that. We respect the challenge that it creates for you as policymakers, and what we're trying to do is just to give you the best information that we can to help you be able to explain this to the people that talk to you about it and to set you up to be able to make effective policy decisions. And so we appreciate the feedback we're getting. I don't want you to think we're bristling at it, but we also want you to know that we're feeling the same level of frustration and the same angst that you are.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here. So, thank you.
Mayor Morris, may I ask you a follow-up question?
Counselor Tukolski?
So, I know everybody's trying really hard, but someone is ultimately accountable for this. And in my household, if my lights turn out, then I have to pay that bill. So, who's accountable for the budget in our city? Who is supposed to make this balanced? Who's supposed to make it right?
The council is ultimately the policy-making body that adopts the budget.
And so we're saying that the council didn't do their job last year?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not willing to
Okay.
go there. What I'm saying is that the people who are here now, the people who are here before us, and the people who are here before them tried their level best to do what they thought was best for the community in the moment. And I'm not going to go there. There's no value in it.
And I'm not trying to go anywhere. I'm just trying to figure out how do we do better going into the future? Because right now it seems like we have a challenge in front of us we need to face.
You're absolutely right about that.
Okay,
I would just say we have never not faced this challenge. I mean, a big part of the reason why we have a city services fee and why we've done these tax increments is to address these shortfalls. And it's clear that the employee cost, the insurance cost is $1 million. That's more than budgeted, $500,000 to PERS, and we're putting aside $700,000 to capital construction. We received, it's like we're a relay team. We have a baton, and now, like you said, we have to deal with what's in front of us.
okay, I'm going to move on from there and go back, see if we can talk about a little bit about this coming year.
Yeah, so I have a few closing comments to sort of set the stage for what you'll see next, and
Okay.
to sort of, I guess, reinforce some of the things that we've already talked about here tonight. We, again, are focusing on getting closer to a place where our ongoing costs match our ongoing revenues. We're committed to building the operational reserve, at least keeping it stable for the coming year, and to make additional investments for capital resources. We are not contemplating new revenues in this budget that haven't already been authorized by the city council. We wanted to take an approach that focused again on operations, primarily the personal services and the M&S in the general fund. All the departments have shared in that effort, and I will just tell you, the folks in this room and the people who are supporting them in the budget operations have really worked hard up until now, and will continue to work hard as long as it takes to bring this issue forward to you. We did not make across-the-board cuts. I think that that's the equivalent of thinning the soup. I think one of the challenges that we gave one another was to really look effectively at the types of services that we're providing, to try to be informed by our strategic plan and by our core services analysis. That said, you will see a budget later this spring that reflects a reduction in services and reflects a reduction in the requests that were made. We expect that to be to you end of April, early May. It'll be a public document then. You will understand the recommendations that went into making that balanced budget proposal to you. You will also see information about reductions that we considered and didn't make, and there'll be explanations for why as we move forward through the budget committee process and council adoption later on. I will also note that we are going to be making some reductions in the current fiscal year. We're doing that for a couple of reasons. One, it limits the depth of the cuts next year. If we're able to save $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 the next 3 months, that's $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 that doesn't come out of next fiscal year's budget. We also recognize that the council and the budget committee have clear policy authority on what what cuts to ultimately make. And so we're trying to focus on the kind of reductions that will save us some money going into next year, but also still preserve the ability for the council and the budget committee to make final decisions on what those cuts might be longer term. And so we're focusing on things as best we can that you can turn back on if you want to turn it on, or you can turn it off more than we're turning it off, for lack of a better term. We will continue to share this information with you as we finish the work. Again, I expect that the budget document will be available to you and publicly near the end of April, early May. We'll have hard copies out to you a couple of weeks after that. We'll be launching the formal process with our first formal budget committee meeting on May 15th. There's a lot to process. That's a week earlier than we normally convene the budget committee. We'll spend most of our time talking about what got us to that budget proposal that you'll see, and then we'll give you about a week to sit with it, to review it, to ask questions, and then we'll come back again the following week and we'll have 2 or 3 more budget committee meetings and work our way through the rest of the process. So we appreciate your patience as the process plays out. We really understand the keen commitment to the community, both in terms of the services and responsiveness to the people who pay the bills here, and we want to just make sure that we provide that information to you in a way that helps you work your way through what's going to be a pretty challenging process this year. Thank you.
I just asked a clarifying question.
For sure.
In part of your statement, you said some requests that weren't made.
So we've reviewed more. I mean, as we have gotten numbers into the system, we reviewed more cuts than we made to get to that $3 million number. And we want to show you what those things were that we considered and didn't include and why.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, for sure.
Counselor Tukalski.
Yeah, City Manager Tower, is this something that's going to be delivered to the council as a proposal, or is it an actual consideration of cuts?
Yeah, it's a proposed budget document that will show the cuts that got us to a balanced budget.
Okay. Is there a reason we wouldn't have a work session that would allow us to work together as a team to decide upon cuts before it's just a proposal? Because we are representing the people, and you're representing the city. We know what the people are asking for. Is there an opportunity to work together closer and sooner so that we can continue to work toward the will of the people rather than just making cuts that might work out to the will of the people?
Just a reminder, we're not making cuts. We'll be slowing spending down the next few months, but the reductions that we propose in the budget will be considered fully by the council and the budget committee before they're made.
Counselor
Right, but if you just
Tukalski, I think
continue
it's,
to, if we're just given an option A or option B, rather than having a seat at the table to consider this and have a discussion, I don't know that it will be as effective. Is there an opportunity to work together?
Counselor Tukalski,
Yes,
that
sir.
is going to,
Ma'am. Yeah.
yeah. So we aren't allowed to have that discussion ahead of time. So we'll
Agreed.
get a proposed budget, and we will have joint meetings with the budget committee and the council. And the city will show us what they have cut and what their proposed cuts are. And then that is when we will have that discussion, and you can provide other ideas at those meetings. That's when we get to have that joint discussion.
Okay.
Which is awkward, I get it, but it's part of the state rules, unfortunately.
And
Okay?
certainly, I think that, the budget team within the city would take recommendations at any point of areas where we might be able to improve, so that they could consider that. So if we as the city council had some ideas, some great, potential ideas to give to them before they actually formalize it, would that be possible?
I don't know, is that possible? Not as a group, obviously.
So the discussion that we have as a group is the same as I cautioned you about at the beginning. Insofar as you bring individual ideas, I don't really know how to speak to that. As counselors, you have access to staff and to the city manager, and you can bring your ideas at all times, I suppose.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have just about 15, Dan, I'll let you talk again, and then we're going to go through.
Yeah, so,
Ideas.
thank you, Mayor Moore. So, City Attorney Leichenberg, so if I were to show up at a budget committee meeting and for some reason attempt to give my input, would that be considered in the budgets that are being considered for the city? Or is that part of the process, or am I out of line at that point?
Counselor Tukalski, as a member of the council, you will sit on the budget committee.
So there will be no budget committee meetings until we meet with the budget committee. The current proposals right now are going through the executive team and the city manager. Those discussions outside of us is where they're discussing.
Thank you. I'm just trying to have a collaborative process here where we
No.
can actually speak about this before we're just handed option A or option B and have to execute one of them.
I
So,
understand the
I'm
desire
gonna
to
be
do
quiet.
that.
I'm going to be quiet now.
No,
Thank you for your time.
you're totally fine. I understand your desire, and I asked that question myself before this meeting, is to, how can we give input on our suggestions? So I totally get where you're coming from. Thank you. I do. So what I would like to do you have, Katie, do you have anything else before the council? I'd like the council to generally give some input based on their opinion and the people within their ward of, again, what areas, if any, is very important to them. And I just feel like that's where we can give a general direction without any specifics. I
Now-
can start if you want me to.
Just a caution, because I heard you say areas, and that sounded to me like programs or line items. That's not what we can talk about. We can talk about philosophies, high
Okay.
level.
Well, hopefully what I'm going to say is a philosophy. If not, you can tell me. My passion for the citizens and this town is safety is number one. Is that a philosophy?
I think that sounds philosophical. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I would say that the folks that I have talked to have referenced the amenities that we have throughout the city and would like to ultimately not see a reduction in the amount of time that these amenities are allowed to be available.
Councilor Peralta?
The biggest complaint that I get from citizens overall is the condition of the parks. And I would note that the reduction in staffing level from parks has gone from over 40 to 25. So that's movement in the wrong direction. I think that we'll see that movement to continue in this budget, which is unfortunate. But protecting those core services is important to me and folks in my ward.
Councilor Geary?
I'll hold my direction until we convene with the Budget Committee and the council with the proposed 25-26 budget.
Okay, perfect. Councilor Tukalski, do you have any input?
Yeah, the input that I can give at this time is public safety is number one. Services for community center, parks, rec, those are probably number two.
Okay.
Making sure that we're safe, first of all, and then having the opportunity to conduct our business as families, mothers, children, fathers, children, everything. That you want to be able to go do things that you enjoy and feel safe doing so. So those are the things that my people are interested in. And then obviously at the minimal cost. So that's the challenge.
Thank you. Councilor Chenoweth?
So yeah, I would say thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for giving me the opportunity. I would agree with safety being number one. I would also say the thing that I hear often from my constituents is they'd like to see faces in buildings. And so getting people back into the building rather than working from home, so that we have regular office hours, and they're present.
Thank you. All right, I think we're good? Okay, I'm going to close the work session at 6:53. Thank you, all of you.
Recording stopped.
Present on a sunny beach, according to my picture.
Peralta,
Present.
and Mayor Morris.
Here. Hey, if you're able to stand for the pledge, I'd like to have you stand, and we're going to be led by Council President Sal Peralta.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we're going to go to public comment. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments, and any comment provided that requires some type of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing at some future date. Comments need to be limited to 4 minutes, and I do need to keep you to that 4 minutes. So I may have to cut you off just because we have to keep to that rule. And if you are on Zoom and wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature or chat feature, and the city recorder will call on you. Once it's your turn, please come up and announce your name and the city of which you live. A couple comments, just so that you know after public comment, if you're here and you have anything in regards to Quarry Park or dogs, the directors are going to speak on those a little bit later, so you may want to stay to hear comments. So, Claudia, who is signed up?
Yes. Before we begin, I do want to state for the record that we received 2 emails, one from Shannon Botten and one from Kevin Chambers on behalf of the CPR PAC. Those were emailed to the council and will be made part of the amended packet for the record. First, we have Elizabeth Hedge on Zoom.
Hi, thank you. My name is Elizabeth Hegday, and I'm from McMinnville. I first want to sincerely thank the police department and the city for listening to the serious concerns raised in the last council meeting and for removing the wolf dogs to a safe location on March 13th. And your work and action to ensure public safety is highly appreciated. After hearing testimony from others, as well as locating more public documents about the history of the wolf dogs and their owner, Sandra Atwood, I am continuing to be shocked and deeply disgusted by her conduct as an animal owner and neighbor. I understand the next step in this process is a court date on April 16th. But in the meantime, this community needs to understand what has already happened so that we can work together to ensure owners of dangerous animals cannot get away with violations for years without effective consequences. In addition to many past instances on public record of noise violations and dogs at large, a police report details a horrible attack on December 15, 2022, where 2 of Sandra Atwood's wolf dogs dug a hole and escaped into her neighbor's backyard and attacked his dog. The neighbor and a contractor were present at the time, and both men had to use a wooden plank to hit the wolf dogs in order to defend themselves and save the neighbor's dog. I'd like to share a few sentences from the contractor's statements, who writes, "During this experience, I was scared for my life and truly thought I was going to be very injured from these dogs. I do believe if I didn't have that wood plank and gotten out of reach from them when I did, this would be a very different story and I would have been severely injured or dead." The wolf dogs viciously mauled the other dog, causing him to be disabled for 6 weeks with continued breathing problems and giving Sandra's neighbor a vet bill of $3,500. It is outrageous to me that these dogs presented a serious danger to domestic pets and humans over 2 years ago, and that Sandra was merely issued a citation for this incident. By the way, Sandra has posted repeatedly on social media claiming that only one of her dogs has ever harmed an animal before, which this police report clearly contradicts. I was also able to review 3 more police reports concerning Sandra and animals she's owned. A police report from 2015 states that a different dog owned by Sandra bit a 2-year-old child in the face at Upper City Park, causing the child to require stitches. Another police report concerns the incident in 2018 Nathan mentioned at the last city council meeting, when a dog owned by Sandra launched out her window and attacked a dog on Nathan's property, causing him and another person to be bitten in the process of separating them. The third police report details an incident on September 15th of last year when 4 wolf dogs escaped Sandra's property and multiple people called the police, including one caller who stated the wolf dogs were trying to attack other dogs. These public documents show that Sandra has previously owned a dog which has injured both humans and a pet, and that her current wolf dogs have a history of escaping, with 2 of them specifically threatening humans and badly injuring another dog, all of which took place before the March 7th killings. We cannot allow owners of dangerous dogs to harm the community through their negligence on an ongoing basis. It's my understanding that Sandra has not paid all these citations and that a lien was placed on her property in December for non-payment of citations. So she has not even taken the bare minimum of responsibility in paying her fines on time. All the other important topics discussed at this council meeting and other meetings, like developing parks and housing and creating a vibrant downtown area, depend on public safety as a basic foundation. It is my sincere hope that we can address laws and procedures in McMinnville to protect citizens and pets from people who cannot control their dangerous animals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Claudia, do we have anybody else?
Yes, next we have Mike Strickland.
I was going to say, Sal, are you the one that got me a little water or something? Because I hope my mouth doesn't go dry in my presentation because I drank coffee.
You want some more water?
Yeah, I would love one because I might be more articulate. I appreciate that. So I'll go ahead and begin. Thank you. Hello, and thank you to Mayor Morris and the City Council for
Just for a
giving me
moment.
this.
Can I just have you state your name and where you live before you start?
Yeah, I sure will.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. So, I'm Mike Strickland, and I live in McMinnville.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Morris and the City Council for giving me this opportunity to speak. First, I want to thank the city for their actions in removing the dogs from the neighborhood. I now understand these dogs are impounded and a court case awaits on April 16th, determining the outcome. I want to speak from the point of view where I'm taking the emotion and the speculation out of the equation. I'm looking at data and facts, things on record that you can see and trace. I'm just now becoming aware that there have been multiple incidents of dogs loose, dogs biting, and now we have 4 loose wolf dogs resulting in 3 different killings of domestic pets in one night just 2.5 weeks ago. My beautiful, smart, loving cat, Ragnar, was one of those killings. In pulling public records, I'm seeing a pattern of an habitual offender over many years. There have been many citations through the police department. The way it works is the police get a call, they come out to investigate, and if the situation is egregious enough, they will file a police report and/or issue 1 or more citations. The police report stays on file at the police department, and the citations go to the municipal court where they have 1 year to be paid. After that, it goes to a collection agency. I have been told the collection agency we use not only sends demanding letters, but will also garnish wages. This all sounds great, except if the defendant doesn't have a job and does not work, then all of this goes nowhere, and there is no restitution. Restitution is defined as, definition 1, the act of restoring to the rightful owner something that has been taken away, lost, or surrendered. Definition 2, the act of making good or compensation for loss, damage, or injury. Now let's all take a deep breath and consider this. According to my conversation with city officials, nothing has been paid. Nothing has been paid. At the municipal court, 1 citation has been in collections for over a year. 3 reduced citations are sitting at the municipal court, currently unpaid for some time now. The compliance division at the city of McMinnville, who also issues citations, have 4 citations unpaid to the point where it is defaulted and the city has placed a lien on the defendant's residential property. This total amounts to $1,000. Everyone, understand, this dog owner is continuing to offend time and time again. And understand this, according to my conversations with city officials, not 1 penny is on record of having been paid. This person has not taken responsibility for the harm they've caused. I also implore the city attorney, the mayor, and the city council to take steps to enter new municipal codes to keep this from happening again and again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia?
Next, we have Jack Brown.
Thank you. Testing, testing. Thank you, Mayor, council members, Chief Wood.
Just don't forget to state your name.
Is it working?
It is.
Okay, and everyone else for the opportunity to be here. And if you had anything to do with today's weather, I want to thank you for that as well. Okay, my name is Jack Brown. I am a retired biology teacher, 34 years, and live in McMinnville, 1 block from the Wolf Dog residence. Mayor Morris, Chief Wood, council members, and everyone else who pitched in, I wish to thank you for impounding these animals, which have disrupted our neighborhood for at least the last 3 years. Mayor, you made a campaign pledge of safe streets and having a long history of volunteerism that you do to be a person of action. Congratulations for achieving both so early in your term a week or so ago. But we are not done. Personally, I have encountered these wolf dogs on the street loose twice. They are big, smart, athletic, fearless, and move quickly as if on the hunt. It is both a beautiful and frightening thing to observe. These exotic animals are merely obeying their DNA and pack and predator instincts. This is what they do. Unfortunately, humans being humans, they have been introduced into a community, a world away from their own world, for the amusement and profit of a single individual. These misplaced animals deserve a better life, and our community shouldn't have to endure their incessant howling, frequent escapes, and deadly behavior. These wolf dogs have now killed at least 3 pets, mauled another, and caused a young family with a toddler and an infant to move away because they shared a fence with these predators and feared for the life of their child. The introduction of exotic species into new communities rarely ends well, but it could be different. Imagine this: the wolf dog owner apologizes, offers restitution for the dead pets, and decides that raising a pack of apex predators in a tiny residential backyard may not be the greatest idea. That would be respectable. But none of that has happened, and that is why we need city government. That is why we need your help and continued support. Perhaps an emergency resolution prohibiting dangerous breeds within city limits. At any rate, thank you for what you have done. Continue to lead with a good heart and to keep our streets safe.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kevin Chambers.
My name is Kevin Chambers. I live in McMinnville, and I'm representing the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Political Action Committee. As a committee, we remain committed to moving forward with a city bond to build a facility at the Miller property this November. We appreciate the time and thoughtfulness of the councilors we met with. Our members were impressed and heartened by the desire to make our town a better place. The conversations were fruitful and invaluable in giving us direction and helping us understand the diverse points of view in our search for a solution for our failing facilities. We want to take a moment to summarize some key points from our discussion with councilors as well as other town stakeholders. We've begun conversations with county commissioners as well as school board members and other community members. First, we had heard a strong desire to ensure that our facilities are built and managed in a fiscally responsible way. We must be mindful of the less fortunate members in our town, many of whom are retired and living on fixed incomes. There is a need to balance providing the facilities and programming our town deserves while ensuring a cost that is not overly burdensome for our most vulnerable members. Regarding long-term responsibility, we also heard a strong desire to prevent any new and improved facilities from falling into disrepair again. This will require dedicated budget items for facility maintenance and a balanced approach through both service fees and a city budget allocation. After synthesizing many options, we recognize a strong community desire for a usable, safe, and family-friendly aquatic center. We also heard the need for community gathering places such as libraries, community centers, and pools. Humans are a social species. We need places where people can come together, step away from our phones and computers, and connect with others. We can build on a legacy of success established by our swim club and high school swimming team to create a facility that reflects the excellence that we've seen in the water. Additionally, we need spaces that serve both families and older residents. Programs like Survival Swim and Silver Sneakers contribute significantly to public health and safety. A new pool is a priority for our community. As a political action committee, we understand that we will likely have to continue this work without financial support from the city. We are incredibly grateful for the efforts of Susan Muir and her staff in gathering data and costs and other resources to help us prepare for informational materials that we can use to educate the public about this project as well as the need for our facilities repairs. We are ready to take the lead on advancing this project, collaborating with stakeholders, and returning to council with ideas and form momentum. Our goal is to educate the public on the need for changes and the improvements to our recreational facilities. Finally, we urge the council to separate this project from the ongoing budget conversations. Our facility issue has multiple possible solutions, none that are going to be easy. However, we must not allow budget concerns to derail our conversation about facility updates. The longer we delay action, the worse our facilities are going to deteriorate. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of closing the pool or the community center, which is an option none of us want. There will never be a perfect time to put forward this bond request. Realistically, even if the bond passes in November, we'll be years away from an opening ceremony. That time can be used to address our city's financial challenges, and we have to think long-term and avoid overly reactive decisions based on an immediate crisis. Past budget crises contributed to poor maintenance of our parks and facilities, and let's not repeat that mistake. We must not let our short-term challenges prevent us from investing in our town's future. Fixing our finances and investing in our community can happen simultaneously. Thank you for your attention and dedication to this project. We're eager to continue this conversation and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Claudia?
Next, we have Stacy Mayhew.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for this time. My name is Stacy Mayhew, and I'm a resident of McMinnville. And these are my animals that were tragically killed on Sunday, March 23rd, by two large breed vicious dogs that came onto my property. This is Sirius Black, Mama Chicken, and Wendy, who are no longer with us. After the two dogs broke through my fencing, they dragged these three onto my front yard and broke their necks. 3 other of my birds are still missing. All we found were feathers. Before these dogs came to my home, they attacked my neighbor's birds, who snapped a picture of both dogs, and then they tried to kill another neighbor's cat through the sliding glass door. He caught this black dog at the bottom on his Ring camera. Sadly, I feel the need to take some of my 4 minutes to defend myself, as people on social feeds are blaming me for this crime. They are also questioning the legality of having chickens within city limits. For 22 years, I have kept chickens on my property in McMinnville, and I have always complied with City Ordinance 8-10-130, which allows chickens within city limits and gives specific guidelines to keeping them. I have broken 0 ordinances. The owners of these deadly dogs have broken at least 4. These 2 vicious dogs broke through my 7-foot fencing to my coop, dragged my animals out into my front yard, and slaughtered them. Shockingly, this is the second incident where family pets have been killed in the past 3 weeks in McMinnville. These situations will continue to happen, and the tragedies will continue to escalate as more people move to our community, knowing there is no dog control enforcement. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank McPD and especially Officer Huey for a lightning quick response and quick follow-up with the other victims involved. Within 24 hours, McPD had posted a bolo on their social page with pictures of both dogs. I only have pictures of one. So what do I want? I'm not just a grieving pet owner, but I am a concerned member of this community who has witnessed firsthand the consequences of insufficient dog control enforcement. I want the city to put this on the front burner. It's a matter of public safety that has been brought to the city's attention numerous times over the past 4 years, and it has been ignored. Today, we have a new mayor and some new city council members, and our community wants and deserves action. I want stiffer penalties for irresponsible dog owners, especially for repeat offenders, and I want the current ordinances and laws to be enforced. So how are we going to do that exactly? Everyone is shorthanded, and obviously the city is in a budget deficit. So let's think outside the box. We've been trying to get a Yamhill County dog control program back into Yamhill County since it was destroyed over 6 years ago. So let's not wait for the county and all the other cities to come together. McMinnville can make McMinnville better. The YCDC officers we had in the past were hardworking and competent. They had proper training, proper gear, proper vehicles, and proper storage for rogue and dangerous animals. The city of McMinnville needs to make resources available to hire a dog enforcement officer with these skills and equipment whose sole purpose is to enforce the leash and licensing laws. This would free up our deputies and our city police officers to address issues that they are actually trained for and paid to handle. It would also bring in revenue by knocking on doors to help cover costs of said officer which have been lost due to non-compliance for registering and licensing dogs. Officer Height currently does something similar to this in McMinnville with the homeless population who are in violation of city laws and ordinances.
Did you submit your testimony to us?
I don't know that I did.
Could you, so we can hear the rest of it?
There's not much. I actually timed myself. Sorry. It's safety for all of us, our pets, and our peace of mind. Oh, thank you.
That was super quick. Thank you, Stacy.
Next, we have Jeff Tucker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jeff Tucker, McMinnville. Thank you, Council and Mayor. I am the lucky neighbor that's right next door to Sandra Atwood. I've dealt with these wolf dogs ever since I moved in right before COVID in 2019, when we still had a Yamhill County animal control. I registered my dog for 3 years, paid for the license, and then it disappeared. I've also been the one who's got to listen to the howling roughly 22 out of 24 hours a day. I've been into numerous calls for noise complaints. I've worked with Darcy in code enforcement. She probably has 50 emails from me. I'm also the one that Elizabeth online had talked about with the dog attack on December of 2022. I was insistent they made a police report, but I had to run my dog down to Salem for emergency, and it was a $3,500 bill. Nathan, my next door neighbor, helped continue to talk to the officers. I've found out over the course of time that we are wasting our assets. We talk about our budget deficit. I have had to deal and talk to corporals and sergeants on the phone, and after I call non-emergency number, because I don't want to waste our resources, and I basically send in the time-stamped videos to do that. We have one dog pole. We have no place to put them except we have to go to Newburgh. We're paying $100,000 for a police officer. That's 1 hour out of the day that they could be doing their job with our increased homeless population and our focus on making downtown great. I've also written the Oregon Humane Society back in 2021. I forwarded an email to Claudia just now, basically asking them to get involved because we do not have animal control anymore. They got with the police department and the McMinnville Police Department. All they had to do was say the conditions were unsafe for the wolves. I'm also looking at the wolf perspective. It is unfair to them. Sandra has never apologized for my dog being attacked. If I wasn't home during COVID and doing my house, I would have not heard my dog squeal, not run down the steps with the contractor to beat him off. One had my dog by the throat. My dog broke its arm or shoulder because it was trying to push the wolf off. The other one had it by its thigh and was trying to pull it that way to dismember my dog. We got the one off the neck. The other one grabbed it by the thigh, We got that one off. The gray wolf grabbed him by the back of the neck and ran around my backyard. I still have nightmares. My dog passed away about 1.5 years ago with lung problems. I've submitted a picture to Claudia that has the pictures of the tubes for my dog. Basically, we need to look at the bigger picture. The confines of a backyard where you should have toys or kids or an animal that you feel safe to have in your backyard, it needs to be in the city of McMinnville, and we need to look at what animals shouldn't be presented. Could I have a horse in my backyard that size? Would it be fair to the horse? So we need to look at the bigger picture, and I know that McMinnville Police Department is open to having dog control as well, or dog control officers. Well, until Homeward Bound builds their new facility, we're in a pickle. We also jokingly talked after with the chief last session that I would be happy to buy some more dog poles. That doesn't solve the problem. We need to look at Sandra, and if you guys would please look at her social media feed. Kirsten Brown, who spoke, her husband spoke today, she gets bullied by Sandra. If anybody complains about the animals, there is a Facebook social feed where she claims that they are emotional support animals. They are not. They are apex predators. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lindsay Baker.
Mayor,
Yes?
this is Councilman Chenoweth. Thank you. Before the next person speaks, I just want to reiterate, they really need to be up close to the mic because it's very hard to hear them if they're not.
Okay, thank you. Can you pull the mic close when you talk?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Baker. I'm a resident of McMinnville, and I'm speaking in support of the Friends of Quarry Park, who are opposing the City Parks and Rec and Visit McMinnville proposed plan to develop the park into a bike skills facility. I'm fortunate enough to live next to Quarry Park, where I regularly walk with my dogs, enjoying the amazing nature there and connecting with community members and neighbors that I cross paths with. This park is a priceless privilege, available to all ages and socioeconomic statuses that should not be taken for granted, and the members of Friends of Quarry Park certainly don't. We are very connected to and protective of this park because we have intimate knowledge of it. This park brings so much happiness and peace to many people who experience it, and if there is a push for broader community awareness of the park, I'm positive that newcomers would appreciate it for what it has to offer in its current state. It doesn't need something built on it for it to become an asset. It already is an asset. It's hard to comprehend proposed development by those who don't have the same connection or reverence for what is already there. It will always surprise and confuse me why anyone would look at a space like Quarry Park and feel inclined to exploit it by digging it up, paving it over, or cutting it down to any degree. And for those who want to bike in the area, not only does a passive use bike trail already exist in the park, but there are also already several path biking opportunities nearby, one of which, the West Side Bicycle and Pedestrian Greenway Path, is directly across Southwest Meadows from Quarry Park, and it snakes behind residential areas and ends at the J. Pearson Neighborhood Park. There's already biking available. It seems superfluous to continue to add more and more biking amenities where other people have different ways they like to recreate. The proposed tourism development of the small 11 to 12 acre Quarry Park surrounded by residential areas is very puzzling. A recent News Register article mentioned that Visit McMinnville has long had its sights on the development of Quarry Park as a draw to increase tourism, seemingly superseding any community usage or desire for the space. And I struggle to see the sense in that. The park is right in the middle of residential neighborhoods. So why is a beloved piece of nature amongst our homes being thought of as a visitor's attraction? Why is a draw for tourists being prioritized over our residents? I believe it is of more benefit to current and future users of the park to have a serene place to connect to nature, educate our children to the native beauty of the wildlife in the park, take in the views, and have a quiet place to nurture our mental health, which is increasingly needed these days. Places for sports and recreation are absolutely important, but let us not overlook the benefit at very little cost and liability of having a nature space for our community's use. Just because you have the means to develop something doesn't mean you should. I find the proposed development for a bike skills push park and play area a limiting of potential use for Quarry Park. I hope if a bike skills facility is a continuing desire for Visit McMinnville, that it finds a more appropriate home, and that any future proposal to develop Quarry Park will reflect the heartfelt responses of the locals who see it for the gift that it already is and their desire to protect something precious. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last one is Jonathan Jacoby.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Jacoby. I live here in McMinnville. Thank you, Mayor Morris, Chief Wood, council members. As you heard tonight as well, I'm also one of the parties involved in the wolf dog incident from a couple weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I had to address you on Zoom. I had to go out of town for work, and on Sunday night, it was my first time coming home since losing our dog. She was around for almost half my life. And even though she was a small dog, the silence and emptiness in our house is just crushing. One of the things that has come from this, as you've seen, is the passion and the rallying behind the community. After it happened, immediately after it happened, I was angry, I was sad, I was scared, I was confused, and just felt really alone. And the community has rallied behind that, as you saw a couple weeks ago. So I want to thank you all for what you've done so far. I know this incident has been a shock to all of us, and there is still a lot of work to do, but thank you so much for what you've done so far. One of the things that can be really tough when we're trying to regulate our communities is you can't really plan for everything. So unfortunately, it sometimes takes incidents like this to see where the gaps are in what we need to do. And so with the passion that you saw from all of us a couple weeks ago, I know the chambers aren't as full as they were, but the issue is still at the forefront of our minds. And now that we've seen what can happen, we are reacting to it accordingly, but I think we're at a pivotal position now where we can go from that reactive situation to a proactive solution. And I know I communicated with some of you via email in those 2 weeks that I was away, so I appreciate the timely responses to that as well and the information that I was provided. So what I would like to see from this, I don't want to see this fizzle out. I don't think that's happening. But one of the sentiments that I really wanted to emphasize with you all is that as a community, we are ready and willing to help. You know, I know in these sessions it can come across as, what are you doing? You're not doing enough, you know, and everyone's just kind of speaking at you and to you and sort of, you know, purging what they need to purge. But know that as a community, we want to help. We have a stake in this as well. We know your jobs are hard. We know you have a lot of focuses that you have on your own. You know, this loss is going to take a long time to heal from. And I don't think I'll entirely forgive myself for what happened and all that. And that's something I have to deal with on my own time. But if there's anything that can come from it, it's that to make sure nobody has to feel this way again, and that nobody has to deal with what we dealt with. The community has been amazing. Yes, there have been some people that have lashed out at myself and others for what we're going through. But that is a vocal but very small minority. And I see more positive trajectory coming from this. And please just know that we want to help. Please let us know how we can help and what you need in order to further drive this so that we can feel that safety and security in our own community again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody that testified or spoke tonight. And just a reminder, we'll have a couple updates from our directors. Thank you. Okay. So our next item is a presentation, Recycling Modernization Act, funding authorization by Geoff Hunsaker, Public Works Director. Geoff?
Claudia's going to help me out here because every time I use my computer, it seems to break it. So this is a very short presentation. It's a bit longer than a department head update.
Just a little closer.
Oh, even closer than that? Okay.
Yeah.
It's angled away from me.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
These things. I'll figure it out one day. Okay. So this is a very short presentation. It's a bit longer than a department head. Thank you, Jenny. A little bit longer than a department head update. So want to talk a little bit, it's really just informative tonight. No council action needs to be taken on this right now. So the Plastic Pollution and Recycling Modernization Act, which was a new law, Senate Bill 582, that went into effect in January of 2022, was passed by the state, and the program itself begins implementation this summer. So what this is, it's a statewide program to modernize the recycling infrastructure here in the state and kind of level set what we recycle. So what gets recycled here will be what gets recycled in the metro area, which is what's recycled in Southern Oregon. They're trying to level set it across. And this also creates new funding mechanisms for local governments to build up this infrastructure. So as part of this, we need to do a local funding authorization. So the money in the law goes to the local governments, and we can authorize direct funding to our local service provider, in this case, Recology. That we have to make that decision by April 15th, and we can modify it every year. There's 5 categories that we can give authorization on. Transportation, which is recouping costs for driving materials further than 50 miles to a depot. Contamination evaluation, which is to do annual checks on the contamination in the recycling that's coming in. The contamination reduction programming, which is informational brochures or campaigns for residents so they can understand what they can recycle. Recycling service expansion, this is that infrastructure build out. So depending on what infrastructure you have, it can purchase, for example, new trucks if you don't have them, but if you do, it won't purchase replacement trucks. So this is trying to build up, build up the entire state here. And then the last one is a purchase of collection containers, so recycling containers that you have at your curb. So not all these would apply here in McMinnville because we have some of these services already. Right now, the way it works is the funding would come to the city and then we would pass it through to our local service provider, except for the 2 items that I've starred there, transportation and purchase of collection containers. We're going to be having that funding go directly to our local service provider, Recology, because there's a lot of additional paperwork we'd have to be doing with every truckload and things like that, and they already have the containers, so there's really no issue with that one. But the others, go ahead in the next page. So, like I said, we'll be submitting that parcel authorization form, and for those other 3 categories, we'll work with Recology and the Producer Responsibility Organization, which is the managing company that the state hired to run this program. We have to develop funding agreements moving forward so we can get the funding coming in to update our infrastructure here. I don't know exactly what touch points we're going to have with the council during this funding agreement. This program is getting rolled out to the entire state pretty quickly, and they're building the plane as they're flying it. So we're learning something a little bit every day. We were supposed to be submitting these authorization forms back in December. They've already extended it multiple times. And then, of course, with all this, we get nothing's free, so we're going to have plenty of paperwork we're going to have to do for DEQ to show how the money's being spent. But we are actively working with Recology on this, and some discussions we're having with them. And by next year, we might be looking that, okay, with the funding agreements all figured out, we can just move on to the money going directly to them, the city no longer having to be a pass-through, or the city can maintain it. But we're not locked into anything. We can change it every year. Just wanted to inform you how staff's going to be moving forward on this.
Any counselors have any questions? Counselor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I understand you just told us you don't know what the touch-ins are going to be with the council, but I think it'd be really helpful once you have a sense with Recology of what's available to us and what their recommendations are, to have them come back to us.
That is likely the plan for this. We're actively trying to make sure Recology's coming in and having those touch points with the council. And because it's an agreement through state funding, I'm almost positive the council is going to have to sign off on it at the very end. So you will definitely be in the loop on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually just did my tour with Recology, and they are talking about bringing that back to the council.
And I don't see any from the other two counselors, so anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you very much. That was like your briefest report yet, isn't it?
Well, now that's a challenge.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
So the next report is not so brief, and we know we have folks in the audience interested in an update from Chief Wood and City Attorney Leitenberg about our animal control ordinance, and so we'd like to ask your permission to have David and Cord talk for a few minutes, and if the folks who are here want to stay and listen to Heather's report, it's going to be really interesting and informative, but we don't want them to have to sit if they're only here to hear from
I think
Cord
that's
and
a
David.
fabulous idea. Thank you. So who wants to start on this side? Attorney David Leitenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. As we have run into the dog issue as presented, there have been, as you well know, a lot of moving parts. Before I hand this over to Chief Wood to discuss some of the details of not only the moving parts, but of the research that he and his staff have been able to pull together, I wanted to point out that as we talk about these dogs and these issues, we are talking about two distinct legal issues. I think that our very eloquent speakers tonight have hinted at them, and I wanted to emphasize them. One has been our ability to enforce against the events that happened 2.5 weeks ago. The ability to prosecute based on the unfortunate events of that evening. As far as that part of the issue goes, we have been able to procure a warrant and impound the dogs. We have indicated that the dogs will not be released before a judge rules on these cases, and those cases are proceeding appropriately under the laws and with the tools that we have. As we have looked at those codes, the major gaps that have been discussed and hinted at tonight are not in these sets of codes. There are some things we have noticed and things that we could clean up, some recommendations that Chief Wood may have for you, but we do have tools now for prosecution and we are proceeding with those. The other half of the legal issue is the ability to do other enforcement, preventative enforcement, things that may have stepped into this space ahead of time, things that may prevent something like this from occurring in the future. That is a more challenging and longer discussion. It is one that we are already doing the research for. Tonight, you already heard recommendations for limitations on breed, limitations on size, limitations on number. All of these present their own challenges. All of these we're trying to approach with openness and with thoughtfulness, but it will take some time. They require careful review. Now, as far as that goes, the community has been as they have indicated, very motivated in this space. We've already had the opportunity to talk with a number of people who have requested the ability to bring in ideas, some like you've heard tonight and some additional ones, the ability to propose actual language, to put together ordinance sections for us. Those are conversations that we continue to be open to. We continue to work with the public to find the best ideas in this space, but I want to, once more before I hand this off, emphasize that this half of that conversation is one that will take us some time. The code, as it stands, was put into effect before I went to kindergarten. I hope to take a good crack at it as soon as we can.
Thank you. Chief Wood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Attorney Leitenberg really hit the nail on the head, and I also would like to tell Mr. Jacoby that you kind of reached into my head tonight, because it is unfortunate that it takes something happening sometimes to point out where the gap is, and unfortunately that's where we were with this incident. Been working with the city attorney since the events in question started. You'll be seeing some recommendations from he and I for cleanup of the code, additions to the code, some tools that we think that are helpful to us in enforcing dog owner behavior within the city, and some of those recommendations will likely include criminal level charges instead of just violation level charges, to give us additional tools to work with.
Thank you both very much for working on that, and most of the staff, we've all been talking about it, so thank you. I'd also want to go to Susan Muir and let her talk about Quarry Park as well. So anybody that might be staying for that conversation can also choose to stay or leave.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to give an update. As you all know, when we develop a park, we make it a collaborative process between the community and the neighborhood and the city. But we look to the Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan for guidance on the parks, where they're located, what they might have, and then we talk to the neighborhood, and that's exactly what happened here in Quarry Park. We had a lot of good feedback. I will tell you there are no next steps planned right now for Quarry Park. We applied for a grant. We did not get it. I know the community is really eager to know when is something happening, and that's the way we piece the funding together for these things, is we look for grants, we look for donations, we look for partners. And right now we don't have any grants that we're applying for. If we do pick that, and when we do pick that project back up, because it is on our 5-year action plan in the parks plan, it will involve communicating with the neighborhood again, like we did, and calling a meeting and listening to them and bringing them to the table, because we want these parks to be enjoyable for everybody. So I just want everybody to know there are no time horizons in front of us with the development of this park. And if something does kick up, we will notify the neighbors again and bring them to the table.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you everybody that spoke tonight. Okay, we're going to go on to listen to Heather. Housing Production Strategy Action Plan by Heather Richards, our Community Development Director.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor and councilors. This was actually intended to be your work session tonight, but got bumped for the very important discussion that you had. Unfortunately, since we're on a deadline, we do need to bring this to you, so I'm going to tell you in advance. We have planned for 45 minutes for this, a half an hour to present some actions to you, and 15 minutes to get some discussion and direction from you. Before we go into that, I wanted to let you know David Berniker, who is our new planning manager, he's here in the audience with us to place a face to the name. Thank you, David. And then Evan Hippas is our associate housing planner, and Beth Goodman from Echo Northwest are going to lead this presentation for you. But just to set the stage, this is something that's mandated by the state. We have already identified our housing needs until 2041. A little less than 60% of our future housing needs to serve households that are making an income of 120% of our area median income or less. And to put that in perspective, currently in our market, the homes that are being built today are not serving they're serving probably about 140% area median income or more. So our market is not building that housing today. The housing production strategy is intended to be an action plan on how we are able to get the housing that is not being built but is our future need built. So it's a list of plans and actions. It's required by the state. We will be revisiting it in 8 years, but we'll have to revisit it in 4 years to evaluate how we're doing on these plans and actions. They do have, the resource intensive. So what we've tried to do is identify in the document that you have before you that was in the meeting packet, what we think the resources will be needed to support the actions and programs. We identified it both in hard dollars for consultants and also staff time, and we quantified the staff time. We do have an affordable housing construction excise tax that the city has developed. So it's a program that's collecting funds for affordable housing that can be used for a lot of these programs. But because there's financial implications, we wanted to make sure we had time with you to go through this list of actions and get your direction moving forward. Beth is going to be able to sort of thread the needle on how the state will respond in terms of the numbers of actions we provide to them and how monumental those actions are. So the plan that we put together, we will be submitting to the state. They'll be reviewing it, and they have been sending them back to cities for more. So we're trying to thread the needle here of looking at our resources, looking at our future needs, and responding to a state mandate. So with that, I'm going to introduce Evan and Beth, and they can do the presentation for you.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think just maybe a couple of things to add before I hand it over to Beth. So the City Council and Planning Commission held a joint work session on December 10th to discuss 28 potential actions that have now been refined and narrowed down to the 16 that you see in the memo. So the 16 actions that are included were decided on through meetings, again, with City Council and Planning Commission, but also the Affordable Housing Committee, the Project Advisory Committee, and then based on outcomes of public engagement and focus group outreach. So we do have Beth Goodman here tonight on behalf of the city's consultant, Echo Northwest, who will be presenting all 6 of those proposed HPS actions. The actions will also be reviewed by the Affordable Housing Committee tomorrow and the Planning Commission on April 3rd, and then they were reviewed by the Project Advisory Committee last week on Wednesday. So just to make sure that we have time to get through the descriptions in that 30-minute presentation, we're just going to ask everyone to save comments and questions for the end of the presentation. And then if further dialogue is needed to vet the actions, we can work with you to find additional time to make sure that we work through those before the potential May 15th Planning Commission public hearing, so we stay on time for our adoption deadline with the state. So with that, Beth, if you want to take it away, and Claudia, if you can just make sure that she's able to share her screen, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you very much, Evan. I appreciate that. I am going to walk through the PowerPoint, and I'm going to be fairly fast. So if there are questions about what it is I'm saying or what I mean, please flag those for me. So let's see, we're doing a housing production strategy that for McMinnville is an 8-year action plan. And I think what's most important here to understand is that we've got 16 actions, and each of those 16 actions are its own project. So there's enormous amounts of detail under some of these actions about how you'll implement them. But these are meant to be responsive to the city's unmet housing needs and the barriers for developing housing. They're in the 4 categories that you see here. And in the end, we're trying to answer the question of, do these actions taken together help McMinnville achieve more fair and equitable housing outcomes when you layer those on top of the city's existing policies, because we're also considering those. We started the project back in spring of 2024. We will finish up with the HPS here in June of 2025. we'll still be working on task 2, the land use efficiency measures, which is on a separate timeline. So the state requirements are that you adopt your housing production strategy by December 2025, and that you're committing to implement the actions in the HPS over the 2026 to 2033 period. So what does that mean exactly? Well, we've heard, a good faith effort to implement the actions in the HPS, and you'll be required to report on implementation progress in 4 years. And to comment on the effectiveness of the actions when you do your next HPS. I am fully of the belief that nearly every city is going to find in their HPS some action that is not appropriate for them once they've done the deeper research and discussions that are necessary. And the reasons could be, a multitude of different reasons. For one thing, the state is constantly changing the policy framework for housing. And so I think by the end of this biennium, there's going to be some sources of funding that are available to cities that say aren't available right now. And that may shape future actions. And that's okay. I think it has to be defined. So remember that things that are not identified in your HPS, so housing actions that aren't in your HPS, but become clear that they're a good idea, those may be things that you can swap in later, or they may be things that you choose to do outside of the context of an HPS. So you've been doing a lot of things. I'm not going to go over this rather long list, but it includes some pretty important things like the Great Neighborhood Principles and implementing a CET and hiring a housing planner, Evan, that puts you ahead of many cities that haven't done those things. So the actions for inclusion in the HPS, what I'm going to focus on is some of the discussion about implementation steps for each of the actions. So we've color-coded these, so long-range planning actions are in blue, etc. We're providing you information about funding and revenue impacts, and then housing impacts. So low impacts are few units produced, medium, maybe more units produced or more affordable units. High would be substantial number of units or substantial number of affordable units. Also remember the housing production strategy also considers opportunities for preservation of existing affordable housing. That's oftentimes the most cost-effective thing to do. So while it says production and we're focused on housing impact, in a few of these, they're really about keeping your existing housing. So the first action is about using more land in your urban holding plan designation for housing, where you're identifying land that may have been planned originally for parks, and your parks system master plan has changed, and some more of that can be used for housing instead. This is one that'll have a high impact, and it's going to not really require funding. It's not necessarily a big lift unless there are issues with doing this, but it's also one of the more impactful ones because it's about buildable land. So the next one is about looking at land within the city limits, where you may do more R5 zoning. So you adopted the multifamily, exclusive multifamily R5 zone a few years ago. You don't have any land zoned for that right now. There will be some in your urban holding, and that's going to be done through your area planning. This is about identifying more land for R5, and you'd be doing that by evaluating opportunities to rezone within your existing limits, city limits, and working with landowners to understand their interests in potentially rezoning. And then eventually this goes with the Planning Commission and City Council to get public input and adoption on this. Again, not big funding impacts. It's probably going to have a medium impact depending on how much land you rezone. If you rezone very little land, then it would have a smaller housing impact. Developing area plans for urban growth boundaries. You're currently doing this with the Southwest Area Plan, and that would be completion of that area plan and then completion of the Riverside South Area Plan. I suspect that you all are pretty aware of what goes into those kind of planning efforts because you've done them a few times recently. But this would be initiating and hiring a consulting team, say, for the Riverside South Area Plan, as well as finishing the Southwest Area Plan. Area plans are fairly expensive. We've identified this as about $350,000 in consultant fees and about $100,000 in staff time. And the housing impact there is high because that's taking land in your urban growth boundary and doing all of the planning or most of the planning that's necessary to make it so that could actually accommodate new development. And then the other side of this is about infrastructure planning. So looking at revisions to your transportation system plan, your wastewater and your public and your water public facility plans for the urban holding plan designation areas and any areas within the city that would be rezoned to higher density. So you'd be adopting public facility plan changes. This is one that could also have a fairly high cost at $300,000 to $500,000 and $100,000 to $200,000 of staff resources for each public facility plan update. Again, the impact is potentially high because you can't develop land until it has the services to it necessary to support that. Looking at regulatory amendments, so codifying your great neighborhood principles in your zoning code, that is something that would go through the Planning Commission, again, looking at a zoning code audit to identify potential existing conflicts with the intent of the great neighborhood principles, and then zoning code changes to eliminate those conflicts. Again, this would require a consultant at about $150,000 and a fair bit of staff resources at $100,000. Likely to have a medium housing impact, but would put the city in a position where its zoning code was really aligned with its guiding principles. So this next one is about requiring a mix of housing types for land that would be annexed. And again, this would look at the needed housing types based on your current stock of housing, your production, your pipeline projects and future projects. So this would mean that you would get less new housing areas, new areas with development that were just one type of housing. And you'd want to maintain consistency with the recommendations in your area plans, of course. You'd have an annexation agreement template and a process to ensure that a mixture of housing types is part of the requirements for annexation. This would rely on staff resources, so not be especially expensive, and may have a medium impact and would certainly have an impact over time as more land annexes. Number 7 is adopting code amendments to support transitional housing development. I think this is something that the city is currently working on with the Affordable Housing Committee, looking at potential successful transitional housing developers to talk with McMinnville decision-making bodies to understand what works well and what doesn't work well for transitional housing. This one relies on staff to implement at about $75,000 of staff resources, could have a medium impact. This is really about how you help people get out of homelessness or help people who are at risk of homelessness, of becoming homeless, not slip into homelessness. So that's what the importance is of transitional housing. Skipping on to talk about incentives. So looking at opportunities to promote accessible design for people with disabilities, looking at potential certification standards or other similar standards. So you'd probably start again with outreach to people with disabilities and local social service providers for people with disabilities to understand the most important features to prioritize and what you would be incentivizing and promoting. So evaluating the cost and design implications with different accessible design measures, and looking at potential code amendments that would incentivize these, and identifying available funding resources to provide developers with incentives if that's appropriate. So this one would be about $75,000 of consultant time and about $50,000 of staff resources. And depending on how much housing you were able to incentivize for accessible design, a medium-size impact. Another one is looking at establishing the multi-unit property tax exemption program. This is one that gets at housing that's affordable in that 60 to 80% of area median income, sometimes above that. I affectionately call this MUPD. MUPD is one of these incentive tools that cities have a lot of control over, potentially. It's a property tax exemption that can be granted for up to 10 years. You would look at the overlapping taxing districts other than McMinnville and attempt to get 51% or more of the combined levying authority to agree on the property tax exemption. That's oftentimes the city plus the school district, for instance. You get to determine the eligibility criteria within state laws, of course. So how much housing or workforce housing would be required, or other types of public benefits, where the program applies, etc. So you set those criteria, and then developers apply or they choose not to apply, and the city council grants or chooses not to grant the tax exemption. There's all kinds of different ways of doing this one. So this would take significant staff time to revise the code and implement. It also can reduce your general fund revenues for your taxing district, as well as overlapping taxing districts. You may or may not choose to verify incomes, or how you do that. A lot of cities use this property tax exemptions, so I expect there would be some interesting lessons learned out there from other cities, including cities smaller than McMinnville. The housing impact could be a medium impact, depending on how much this is used, so how your program is structured. Incentives, again, looking at scaling up system development charges. So looking at when you change your system development charge methodology, looking at size of the unit, where you're charging smaller system development charges on smaller units, and larger system development charges on larger units. So when you next update your SDC methodology, which is something that consulting services cost generally about $250,000 for, you would do this kind of change. And it would be about $100,000 in staff support, and potentially have a medium impact. And what it's really going to incentivize is development of some of the missing middle type housing. So things like townhouses or duplexes, cottage clusters, that kind of thing. So less expensive, potentially smaller units. So then thinking about programs that are land-based, one of the more interesting options for supporting development of housing that is owner-occupied for low-income households is partnering with community land trusts. And they generally have a housing that is more affordable because it is limited equity over time. So the community land trust owns the land, the owner of the house owns the unit. When they sell it, they've got a sales agreement that says that they will get a limited amount of equity in it, so that when it's sold next time, it's also sold to a household that is low income. So this one relies on state and local resources for land acquisition and staff resources. So how much this is going to cost partially depends on how much development you get with land trusts. I can say that land trusts are a very popular idea. and there's just not enough land trust in the state. This can have a medium impact in that it's one of the few ways to get more affordable homeownership units. So then the other part of this is looking at supporting affordable housing development through land provision. And this would be the city, say, looking at its surplus land. So evaluating land that the city owns and identifying if any sites are not needed for public uses and appropriate for housing development. And then what you choose to do with that site, you've got multiple choices, but you want to focus on some form of public use for housing that either gets you more rental housing that is affordable, such as income restricted rental housing, or something like a community land trust, or working with residents of McMinnville who say want to build their own housing, but getting control of the land is particularly difficult. This is something that our advisory committee talked about quite passionately, and is an interesting idea. You also may choose to use things like your CET for land acquisition in specific areas. You may also do something like issue a request for proposals for affordable housing. You see places like Hood River have done this, I think, to good effect, where they're getting mixed income housing. It's rental housing, but mixed income is a hard type of housing to get. So you've got some lower income housing and some higher income housing. This could combine a few different of these actions. So looking at increasing housing choice and preservation, developing and adopting a strategic housing opportunities plan, where what you're doing is you're looking at gaps in your existing housing market and how to fill those gaps. So starting with engagement with historically marginalized groups, such as Latinos, people of color, people with disabilities, other groups that are underrepresented in access to housing, and developing an analysis of needed changes to the city's policies beyond what we're talking about here. And then, adopting some of these newer revised policies. This may lead into, in a lot of ways, some things that you want to do in your next housing production strategy as well. I've seen some cities do this kind of work before they engaged in a housing production strategy. So there's really some more work that needs to be done to understand the funding impacts, and this could have medium. For some communities, it might have a higher impact, especially for affordable housing. So the next one, item 14, is similar to item 13, and you may end up thinking about implementing them together. So this is really an analysis that looks at causes of displacement and how you can avoid them through policy changes and increase housing stability. So again, this looks at housing issues for your historically marginalized communities, and looks at anti-displacement practices from things like the Anti-Displacement and Gentrification Toolkit developed by Portland State University, as well as other potential actions. This might result in comp plan amendments. It might also result in additional changes to your development code, your housing program, or your partnerships. Again, this one requires consultants at about $75,000 for the initial report, and about commensurate staff resources, and might have a medium impact. So number 15 is a demolition fee for demolition of existing affordable homes. A number of cities have used this, where you develop a criteria to identify the types of demolitions that would be subject to the fees, and identify exceptions if there are any, set the amount of fees, and then determine how the funding from the fee will be used, such as preservation of existing affordable housing or supporting development of new affordable housing. And then the last one is about preserving and supporting development of manufactured home parks. So this one for preservation would be the city working with manufactured home park owners to understand when they want to sell or redevelop their manufactured home parks, and then acting as a convener with residents of the manufactured home parks to understand their interest in purchasing the manufactured home park. And then engaging nonprofits who do this kind of work around the state, such as CASA or St. Vincent de Paul or the Housing Authority, and working together to help enable them to purchase the manufactured home parks. Now, whether the city puts funding into that or not would obviously be a policy decision that the city would need to make. In terms of supporting development of new manufactured home parks, it hasn't been happening around the state a lot, but I know of one that's being developed in Madras, or at least on the books for being developed. So looking at your zoning code and whether there are any barriers to new manufactured home parks, considering whether to provide incentives for a new manufactured home park developments, and working with the Affordable Housing Committee and Planning Commission and City Council to get input on these potential changes. This would rely on existing staff time. If you offer financial support, of course, that would have funding implications, and it could have a high impact, especially on people who live in manufactured home parks currently, because conversion is more likely to happen as prices get more expensive, land prices. So this is a summary table of when implementation for these items would be estimated to be going on. We'll have a more detailed implementation plan timeline in the housing production strategy. And with that, I feel like I plowed through those really fast.
And Beth,
So now it's your turn.
I'm going to add something while you're on this table. So
Yes, ma'am.
there's big numbers in here in terms of the funding piece of it. We wanted to be honest with you and honest with the state as to what they're asking for resources from the city to do these types of strategies. But I also want to be honest with you that many of the ones that are identified as implementation years 1 to 2 are already underway and funded with your budgets. All but the number 15 that is in year 1 to 2 is underway right now. And then also many of the programs can be funded with the Affordable Housing Construction Excise Tax Fund. So that fund currently has about Evan can correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhere about $1.2 million in there for programs right now. It generates, we're moving into a low development time period for the city because of our land supply issues. So we expect it will generate about $300,000 over the next couple of years per year. But as development starts coming in, it will pick up and start generating more. So remember, this is an 8-year program, and outside of the tax abatement and tax credit programs that are in here, many of the ones that are resource intensive can be funded through that CET fund or through state resources. There's a lot of affordable housing funds right now that are being implemented through programs of Oregon Housing and Community Services.
And number 9, MUPD is a particular type of exemption of the type that CET is particularly designed to help with and intended to help with.
Heather, can you just verify for me? So all of these are required by the state for us to do?
No, so the state has a laundry list of, 50 or 60 suggested actions that cities can look at to do to meet their housing needs. And then we, as at the local level, decide which ones are actions that will meet our housing need. What the state's going to do, though, is look at our housing needs analysis, and that's why I start off by saying 60% of our future housing need is for housing that's not being built today. So the current market's not building it, so somehow we need to nudge the market into building these things. The state's going to be looking at our housing needs analysis and say what's not being built and what are the actions that the city's proposing to get that housing built. And they're going to start, comparing the two to see if we've developed an action plan that will do that. When we put this together with the project advisory committee, the city, we had started a housing strategy back in 2019 when we were working on this before the state went into their program. And so we've already been carving off some of these strategies, and we're going to submit to the state the ones that we've already implemented. We're ahead of some other communities that way, so I'm hoping that will generate some points for us. And then we also wanted to, bring to bear those projects that are already underway that we're working on today but haven't been adopted yet, so we can put them in the action plan. And then those that we think we can fund through the Affordable Housing Construction Excise Tax Program. So we tried to, when we put these actions together, come to you with a list that we think will help meet the needs, but also something that we can fold into our programs as best as we can. There's land provision and other things in here that will cost resources, and so we'll have to have discussions about how we deploy those affordable housing funds. But the staffing resources you see in here, we have Evan, who is our associate housing planner, is right now funded 75% through the Affordable Housing CET program. We're going to shift him into 100% next fiscal year, so that's coming all out of that program so that he can be the staffing resource to move these things forward.
And so were all these already presented to a previous council for approval, or do they come to us for approval?
They're going to come to you for adoption.
Later.
So this is the first time we've come to you with sort of a package that is flushed out like this, with the funding mechanisms and with the how it's going to impact the housing and what our needs are, and when we think we're going to implement them. So that time frame is important too in terms of the implementation years. We thought through when would we have resources to be able to implement these. But we will need to, we're working under a grant, and if we are able to adopt this by the mid-June, we'll be able to get the grant. If we don't adopt it by mid-June, we will relinquish the grant. So we're working towards trying to preserve those grant funds and get this adopted by mid-June. It will go to, it's a planning process, so it will go into a public hearing process at the Planning Commission level. They'll then review it, make a recommendation to you as City Council for adoption.
Okay, thank you. Evan or Beth, are you needing to proceed?
So our questions are these. If you have any comment, if you're not able to comment now, of course, I think Evan and Heather would be more than happy to have your comment. But it would be nice if we got those in the next week or so.
Any counselor have any immediate questions? Counselor Cunningham?
Yeah, just in the report, it talks about a need of 59% of future homes built to meet the needs analysis. That 59%, is that an algorithm like from the state, or is that our own analysis tells us that we need 59%?
And it's 59% of our future housing needs to serve households making 120% area median income or less.
Correct.
So it's twofold. The state mandates to us what's the planning population forecast that we plan into, so that tells us how many housing units we need. And then we look at trends in the community in terms of past trends as to how is this community currently and historically been focused in terms of the housing mix here. So that's sort of the definition of, resort community, high-end housing versus a community that I would say is like McMinnville, which has a mix of housing, right, serving all different income levels. So we look at our historic trends and we look at what our future values are and we forecast into that. We already adopted the housing needs analysis, and that went through a process, and the decision was made that we would like to grow the same way that we have been as a community in the past in terms of having housing that meets all spectrums of income in the community, and also the opportunity for people to participate in home ownership and rental opportunities in all income levels as well. So that's what determined that number.
Okay, thank you. Do we currently have any active community land trusts?
We do not have any here in McMinnville. We've been talking about it at the Affordable Housing Committee for a couple of years now. It's been on an action plan that was adopted by the City Council a couple years ago. Our Housing Authority has explored whether they have the opportunity to set one up themselves. They've also talked with other existing community land trusts throughout the state of Oregon as to what the structure is. And so they're willing to prop one up. We've heard from other community land trusts in the area. There's one called Proud Ground that's interested in McMinnville too. It's dependent upon land, so that's why we haven't actually implemented this system yet, because we don't have the land. But there has been a lot of dialogue and exploration of that, so I feel pretty good we'll be able to pull that one off if we get the land.
Fantastic. And then last question, can you give us an example of the surplus city land that might be available?
An example that is being dialogued right now, actually by the McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. We've shifted it for a little bit because of our work plan, but there's a lot of the land the city owns is, I would say, that's not already serving the city in different ways. So obviously our parks and things like our facilities. A lot of the land the city owns is remnant land from transportation projects. That's what it looks like to me. So we own a triangular piece of property there by the intersection of Riverside and Lafayette. And so we're looking at that right now. We did look at that to see if it's developable for housing or mixed use, and we think it is, so that would be one. We also looked at a piece of property, again, another remnant of a transportation improvement, which is, it's sort of, I call it a long Band-Aid strip that's next to the McMinnville Inn. There on Baker Road as it comes into 99. We think that one's too narrow to actually move forward with housing. But that's sort of the discussion as we've been looking at different properties. And then as we continue to work through the UGB lands that will be coming into the city, there might be more opportunities for city land ownership. So,
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Do you have anything else? Oh, sorry. Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. Heather, specific question, I just want to put a bug in your ear about it. I think we've already talked about it before, but I believe the city owns a couple of parcels of land on Cleveland Avenue at Mill Pond.
I'm actually not familiar with that, so thanks for the bug.
Heather, that's the one that you and I have actually talked about a couple times. I don't believe the city actually owns that land.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we've scrubbed our maps pretty hard for land.
Okay, anything else, Evan, Beth?
Just to give you the next steps, here is the hearing schedule.
Okay,
And with that, I hand it back to Evan.
thank you.
Yeah, if there's no further comments or questions at this time, that was really what we wanted to get out of it, was just giving you all an update and an opportunity to share any thoughts. So if something pops in your head, feel free to email myself following tonight.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One last question. The next time you will see us is at the city council with a recommendation from the planning commission, unless you want to see us again. So one of our questions was, do you need more time with this, or are you comfortable that you understand the product and you can get us your comments individually if you'd like to, and we'll work that through the process.
I think we can do comments, email comments and concerns or questions.
Yep. Okay.
We'll do that. Okay, thank you, Evan. Thank you, Beth. And Heather.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on, try to get through this for you. Reports from counselors on committees and board assignments. I'm going to start to my right. Counselor Cunningham.
Yes, so MCM 11 met this last week. They elected a new executive team. They also reviewed a document that could set up a policy for accepting sponsorships, which would obviously help with their revenue stream as well. And then we were given an update on a calendar of events. As you just heard, the housing production strategy had a lot to talk about this last time. And then I did have a meeting with Edward Taub about Operation Generation, getting into multi-unit generational housing opportunities here. And then another comment just is about the potential of a quiet zone that would be dealing with the railroad. That was brought to me by some constituents, but I met with Director Hunsaker and figured out that there's a lot more that goes into the quiet zone, and unfortunately I don't think we're going to be having that discussion anytime soon.
Councilor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. Planning Commission met on March 20th. There was a quasi-judicial hearing as part of that meeting, and I generally don't attend those to avoid a conflict in case they get appealed to the council. McMinnville, Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments met for its quarterly meeting. And just so folks on the dais and in the audience understand, the Council of Governments is our regional economic development entity. It provides community development, planning services, economic development, transportation, and housing development. And as a result of the kind of services they provide, the largest share of their budget is related to the administration of state and federal grants. Currently, about 70% of the COG's budget is based on federal and state dollars. Given the cuts that are happening federally, the executive director is concerned that several accounts tied to federal grants are late pay, which creates a cash flow problem for the organization. Just another way of kind of helping to understand how some of those changes are affecting us at the local level. They also are wanting to put together a local services planning committee, essentially a policy level committee consisting of city council, elected officials, one member of a county, one member of a city under 10,000 population, a member of a special district, and a member of a city over 10,000, and then a technical committee with a finance director of a county, finance director of a city over 10,000, a finance director of a special district, and one for a city under 10,000. I don't know if we want to participate in that, but if there's anybody on the council that would like to participate, we'd definitely take your interest, or if there's a member of staff that's interested as well. Affordable housing is meeting this week, tomorrow, I think, and I have a meeting conflict and won't be able to attend that. Scott's got it, though. Finally, I was able to participate in the first Sprout Summit, which was an activator event that brought leaders from public, private, and nonprofit sectors with expertise in sustainability, built environment, manufacturing, agriculture, circular cities, and circular supply chains. More than 40% of the 100+ attendees were members of business and industry, 14% were nonprofit leaders. I'm grateful to Councilor Cunningham for attending, and it sounds like the event was a tremendous success. That's all I got.
Thank you. So I have on March 19th, I attended the monthly meeting of the mayors within Yamhill County. Carlton Mayor Linda Watkins hosted us this month, and our general discussions were around budgeting. McMinnville will be hosting next month's event. I also met with Dwayne Pace, the new CEO of the hospital. He seems like he's going to be a great fit for our community. Also was able to participate in a video series for Juliet's House. April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, or prevention, and so I was able to do a video there. In April, they ask that you wear blue on Fridays if you can. And also every Friday, I attend a legislative committee meeting with staff and our city manager. And that committee is going to present eventually to our council to explain to you how we get to the asks that we ask federal and state for grants, so that you understand the process and the kind of the quirks that go along with that. And thank you, Councilor Gary, for asking for that presentation. Councilor Gary.
Okay, my only update is on Visit McMinnville, Murac, and Stormwater. 3rd Street haven't met, but on Visit McMinnville, gave some reports. they're developing a push to post-pandemic push to market Willamette Valley as the wine country weddings destination, and McMinnville is sort of the home base for that. So there was a lot of talk and analysis and presentation on where people are marketing weddings and the industry for weddings and how much that touches industry around town, and they're trying to lead this push of an area in the market they don't see being served here as a wine country wedding in the area as an alternative to Napa, and McMinnville positioned as the home base of that. So it was fascinating. Don't plan on needing that service again. Did not receive the grant for Quarry Park. Talked a little bit about Quarry Park at Visit McMinnville. Steve gave a very fast update. A couple highlights from that. In the Willamette Valley, I believe this is from last year to this year at this point in time, occupancy rates are generally down. Willamette Valley specifically is down 2.4% in occupancy rates, but McMinnville specifically is up 5.3%. Let's see, he's seeing that 88% of Americans still have travel plans in the next 6 months, but in February they're polling from a more international, more regional draw internationally. We see a lot of Canadians driving across the border to travel, and that is down 24% since February, or in February it was down 24%. But our local area has a Canadian event called Canada's Great Kitchen is still happening here in town, April 10th through the 13th, and the culmination is a little music and food event headlined by Stephen Page, founding member of Bare Naked Ladies. You got it, Jeff. That's the bulk of my report on Visit McMinnville.
Thank you. Councillor Tukalski?
Yeah, I can't follow that one. My committees have not met, and I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chenoweth?
Okay, here we go. So Parkway met. Believe it or not, construction has begun on Phase 2A. Never thought I'd see Phase 1, much less beginning of Phase 2 in my lifetime, but here we are. Highway 219 interchange project construction has started with tree and brush removal underway. No one at this point knows what to anticipate regarding federal funds for future projects. Lots of Oregon legislature talk as to transportation funding options. That's still, discussions are underway. I'm not sure where the legislature is at on a infrastructure transportation bill. And then working with ODOT to try to elevate the safety solution at McDougall Junction and other connector roads such as Lafayette Highway and Highway 18. And lastly, there's some work that has been done on the Phase 2 golf course right-of-way. And in order to make it through that area, there has to be some changes to the golf course. And so there's some changes for the swap of land that will be taking place. So that's Parkway. In terms of EVLC, set our goals. Goal number 1, 3rd Street Improvement Project, continue to advocate for the successful implementation of that project. Number 2, Innovation Campus, we're continuing to steward the master planning and public infrastructure feasibility analysis. Number 3, workforce housing. We'll be studying ways to increase the availability of workforce housing in McMinnville with a focus this year on the Alpine Avenue Street Improvement Project and the residential redevelopment envisioned by the Northeast Gateway District. Number 4, we're going to continue to support the leveraging of the airport master plan and land use planning that's going on. And then number 5, we're going to do, like I think I mentioned this before, but we want to do a grant effectiveness evaluation of the grant monies that were given to us to ensure that we were good stewards of that money. We also had a presentation that was brought to us by Gary Reddick on cottage cluster items that he has. And I was kind of surprised. I don't really know what this means. I think probably our construction guy on the dais would know what this means. But he said they're right now being able to come in right around at $225 a square foot on their building for their cottage cluster designs. I was told by the facial reactions that was really good, but I don't because I'm not in construction, I don't know that. It was really cool. It's complete areas, 4 to 8 acres is what they prefer, but they can go as small as a half acre. And they design neighborhoods of cottages that are pretty kind of neat in the way they're set up. Central, all porches centrally facing with open greenway in the middle. Let's see, anything else that I missed? Oh, yes. I have had multiple conversations as being appointed to the vice chair of MWACT. I am now going to be apparently presenting to OTC. And so that should be happening on April 23rd. And I had the opportunity and enjoyment to listen to our House Rep and Senator at a open house they did over in Amity, or listening session, talk about the state of the legislature and where we're at. And I think that's everything.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start to my right tonight. Claudia, do you have anything?
Just want to remind council that there is a joint work session with the McMinnville School District next Monday at 6:30 at the McMinnville School District office. Sorry, I should have had this, which is 800 Northeast Lafayette Avenue.
Thank you. Jeff?
Just to let you know, we had we added the COOP plans to our contract with our consultant who was working on the emergency operations plan. She's just about wrapped up with finalizing that plan, and we had money left in our grant, so we moved into doing the continuing operation plans, since she's going to continue to help us out so we can keep moving that work forward.
Great, thank you. HR Director Vicki Hedges?
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Muir?
Just one thing, actually two. You got an email. I hired the Aquatic Center manager, the replacement for Rob Porter. I'm really excited to welcome Joshua Rooser to town from Salt Lake County, Utah. He will be starting mid-April. And I wanted to make sure everybody knew there is a celebration for the retirements that are happening in Parks and Recreation on Friday the 4th at the Community Center. I think it's 3 p.m.
It is.
I think you are correct. Yeah. Hope to see you there. We have 4 people that are celebrating their retirements.
Director Berg?
Nothing to report.
Director Lofgren?
Just wanted to let council know real quick, we have very busy construction season coming up ahead of us. And in an effort to get ahead of that, we're trying to make a strong push to update everything on our engineering website. And so feel free to go there to look for construction updates on some of those projects. Tried to clean up some of the old stuff. We found some things that were back before 2015. And so we're making an effort to clean up some of that and get very current information up there for everyone to be aware of.
Great, thank you. Councilor Gary?
For that work that's happening up, is there an update on the Sue Buell Safe Routes to School sidewalk? Is that going in still? Was that on the list?
I don't know, Heather or Gio?
Not on the list. We're not able to build that project. I can send out a longer memo on this, but essentially there was a miss in the original estimate that's for the crossing improvements on the railroad. And we're basically like 1.8 million short. And since the crossing improvement was a key part of the Safe Routes to School grant, we cannot remove it from the project and still get the grant money. So we're having to reassess and look for additional dollars for that right now. And we can reapply for the grant as well, but we didn't have the $1.8 million available to us to make those improvements. And then there's a additional issue that we're trying to figure out with the railroads now, where when you do the rail agreements with them, they are now asking cities to then take on maintenance of those crossings indefinitely moving forward. They get to set the amount and they get to change it as they feel they need to. So you can add in an additional 25 to maybe even $40,000 a year annual check that you're sending the railroads. So it's very frustrating. We're trying to figure it out, but we weren't able to keep the money from the state because we would have had to pay an additional $1.8 million, and it'd be cheaper for us to build all the other improvements on our own without the state dollars.
Council Peralta has a comment.
Yes, just, that was part of the package of federal dollar requests we made of Senator Merkley with the railroad crossing.
The delta, the 1.8 to cover the delta? Okay. Okay.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. We're going to go over here. I'm going to start down there and come to you. Noel?
So just a friendly reminder for the council, Mayor Morris has asked that I do a city council feature in the city's e-newsletter. So I've sent a couple of requests out already, but just keep an eye out for that. And hopefully, yeah, we'll just make it real easy, just a little chat between you and I so that we can get something going. Thank you.
Heard.
Basically respond to Noel, right?
Yes.
Chief Wood, do you have anything else that you'd like to add tonight?
Nothing more from police.
Okay. Director Richards?
Yes, I just want to follow up and let you know we have scheduled the joint work session with the Board of County Commissioners and City Council in Murac. It's scheduled for April 8th at 5:30. Will be there's a committee from Murac, and Councilor Geary is a member of that committee that will be sitting down, sort of thinking through the agenda for that evening. We'll facilitate it.
Thank you. Director Henry?
Nothing more from finance. Thank you.
Attorney?
Nothing from the legal department tonight.
City Manager Towery?
Thank you, Mayor. No report tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilor Chenoweth asked to have something added to the agenda, and it's in regards to a schedule discussion. Councilor Chenoweth, can you bring that forward?
I would be happy to. Thank you for this opportunity. So yeah, I have, first let me say, I'm not intending to put any pressure on anybody or put anybody in a spot if that is so what happens here. I'm just putting a question out to my fellow councilors to see if they would be amiable to a potential shift in our schedule. One way or another, I will attend. So let's just make that clear. My ask would be, we have, since I've been on council, run our meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesday, second and fourth Tuesday, third Wednesday. Not something I have preferred along the way. I feel like I would prefer to have our meetings all on the same day. I think this mixture kind of hodgepodge schedule is a little bit less than ideal. I think it's hard to remember, and it's certainly hard to explain to constituents. So I'd like to see that change to where all three meetings take place on the same day of the week. Secondarily, I would like to ask if we can move it and have it not be on Tuesday nights. I don't care about any other night of the week, but I would love to get my Tuesday nights freed up for a personal commitment that I have had. It used to be on Thursday nights. I've had it for 27 years. It has moved from Thursday nights to Tuesday nights. So that's my ask. Willing to answer any questions or explain more if more is needed.
Any questions of Councilor Chenoweth? There's no questions. I'd like to give time for the councilors to think about it, and we will bring it back next week with responses.
That's great. And like I said, I'm open to any that works. One of the ideas I had, I'll just throw this out there. One of the ideas that I've had for some time is I would love And I know Mondays can be tough for Monday Night Football fan people. But I have always kind of looked at Monday nights as the better night, with a Friday 5 o'clock deadline for staff to provide us information. So we have the whole weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and then our residents have Monday to comment, leading into a meeting Monday night. So I think that's a potential workaround. But again, I'm open to any day of the week if you guys are kind enough to be willing to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to make one comment about Mondays is, number one, we have more holidays are on Mondays, so it would be, again, shifting. And I did have a discussion with our city recorder in regards to Mondays, and it may be more difficult for them, and they may end up having to work on some Sundays in order to get things prepared on Monday. So, but we're going to have I want everybody to put some thought into it, and we'll get back to you, Chris. Thank you for asking the question. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and we're going to separate the two tonight. The first one is consideration of the draft minutes of the February 25th, 2025 City Council work session and regular meeting, and I'd like Claudia to make a comment about those.
Yes, at my earlier meeting with the mayor, she did point out that there was a Scribner error on, I believe it's page 3, which states Council Peralta asked for public comment, or it first was Mayor Morris, but it should be corrected to Councilor Peralta. So that has been corrected, and the motion will be to approve as corrected.
Do I have a motion or any?
Point of clarification, are we moving just the amended motion, or are we moving the consent agenda as a whole?
No, just for the minutes of the 25th, except those as amended.
I move the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, so I have Councilor Peralta, second by Councilor Cunningham. Any additional discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Let me.
Roll. I got to get used to that.
Forget that I said that.
Councilor Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilor Tukolsky.
Aye.
Councilor Chenoweth.
Now aye.
Councilor Geary.
Aye.
And Council President Peralta.
Aye.
Okay. Passes by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to consider the request from Bittermonk for a limited on-premises sell OLCC liquor license located at 250 Northeast 3rd Street. And I believe we have Councilor Cunningham that needs to recuse himself.
Yes, I need to recuse myself because I will be a minority ownership in this new venture.
Thank you. Any questions, or do I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept the request.
So that was from Councilor Geary.
Second.
Second from Councilor Peralta. I don't know who was talking. Any further discussion? Claudia?
Councilor Tukolsky.
Aye.
Councilor Chenoweth.
Aye.
Councilor Geary.
Aye.
And Council President Peralta.
Aye.
And the request passes by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you. Next, we have consider resolution 2025-08, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of McMinnville amending the allocation of American Rescue Plan, so ARPA funds. I call on Katie Henry, Finance Director.
Okay, so we're ready for take 2 on this one. And because it is once again later in the evening, and I want to make sure that I give you enough time to ask questions now that we have some updated information in there, I want to point out just one change that I've made to this since we last talked about it. So in your packet, in the added amounts on page 4 of 10, or in your packet on page 100 of 114, you'll notice that we've made an adjustment to the library HVAC replacement and inserted another project, which is community center. What we are asking for on these projects is to take the funds that were set aside for the library HVAC replacement, which we have discovered would take significantly more funds than that to complete that project, and move what is there over to the community center, because we have so many maintenance projects happening at the community center that in order to keep the doors open, we need some funds to be able to do some of that maintenance. And so we'd like to be able to use some of the ARPA funds for that. And the library has graciously said, since we can't get the full HVAC project done, and right now the community center doesn't have an operating elevator to get folks up and down in the community center, that's a higher priority. And so we have inserted that here. So that is the only change that we've made compared to what we've presented last time.
And the 7,250 that's left there, can you just?
That was already spent in the past in starting the project. So expenses as you begin the project and then realize, okay, our estimates were not where we expected and we need to pull back out.
Got it. Thank you.
So with this new information and with the added statuses that we've put in your packet as to where we are with these projects, are there any questions from council as to what is being requested here or any clarification needed? You'll notice we have all the directors here if there's any specifics needed, but the goal of this resolution is simply to memorialize what's been done on these projects and provide that legal foundation for the amounts per project that we are looking at, and to true everything up as we head into the budget for fiscal year 26 and have everything lined out.
I do have a question. First of all, thank you for doing this so that I can understand, and also thank you, Claudia. She came into my office and kind of helped a little bit. But by reading this chart, I do have a question, and I'm going to address it to Vicki because it says HR on here. So it says HR DEI implementation, and it looks like there's about $89,000. Can you tell me what's going to happen with the $89,000?
So you're referring to the funds that haven't yet been
Yes.
spent? Yeah. Give me just 1 second. So right now, Noelle and I are partnering on those funds. Right now, we have that about $89,000. $15,000 of that is dedicated to paying for the NeoGov software for our training for employees. And that training is compliance-based training all the way up to some of our training for our officers for their DPSST requirements. So that's about $15,000 of that. And then there's about $5,000 dedicated to recruitment costs for DEIAC committee members. And then the rest of that, Noelle's working on signage in city parks, talking with the DEIAC committee about maybe trainings that city employees need, and then also translation services. So that would be the rest of that $89,000.
I guess I have a question of why we spend money to recruit a committee member.
It's not necessarily for recruitment, Mayor. It's for, there are no other funds to support this committee. So for the time being, if we have, if the committee has a vacancy or during the end of the year when committee members move off and we need to put the notice out in the newspaper, these funds would just support putting an ad in the newspaper essentially.
And do we do that for other committees?
We do, yes.
We do.
All of our committees.
I thought we could do that social media.
We do that as well, but yes, the News Register is one of those places where we we support paid advertisements.
So I have a question. Is there any other requirements like in the HR department that you're needing funds for that would, I'm not going to say better use, that could use this versus signage in a park and recruiting? Is there a requirement that we're needing to fill? Again, in a budget situation that could come out of the HR budget, possibly? If not, that's fine, but I want to ask.
I would never want to say like that something's more important.
And I don't want to
so
say it that way
I wouldn't want
either.
to
I just-
suggest that.
we
The
have-
bulk of the HR budget, what I can say, is personnel costs, and then our a little bit of professional services that we use for legal, and then our NeoGov software for the rest of the modules that we use. So we have the training module. We also have our evaluation module, our recruitment. That's how we recruit with the NeoGov software. So that's the bulk of the HR budget, but whether or not ARPA funds can be used for that, I'm not certain.
So do we have an evaluation module right now?
Yeah, we do.
We do.
Yeah.
Counselor Geary.
I had a question just on reading the projects and dollar amount and sort of total spent, and then doing my own delta to see which ones have balances, but updates or descriptions that don't. So things like backlog in court cases has 67,000 adopted budget, requested project matches, and then total spent through December 61,164. So there's some left. Is that we have more work to do $6,000, or we came in under budget $6,000? How should some of those be read?
So if they are expected to be completed in fiscal year 25, it means that those projects are in process. So if we talk about, for example, the municipal court, we currently have a temporary individual coming in to work on some of that backlog, and we expect the remainder of that budget to be used up before the end of this fiscal year. So it's not that it's being returned. The money's not being returned. Other ones will say that they are completed, and that money is then returned to the bucket.
Understood. If there is a delta remaining.
If there is a delta remaining.
Very good.
Any questions? I have another question.
Okay.
So if we accept this tonight so that we're in line with what has been assigned, can adjustments still go back and be made for money that
Absolutely.
isn't spent?
This allows us to keep moving with what we have. I do want to caution you that there was a lot of work done in past years. This is really the brief summary. The projects that were put into place, and that the DEI implementation is one of those projects, were sent forward, and us receiving the funds were a condition of some of those being included in there. So yes, we can change, but we can change as in we can add more and we can slightly modify, but we can't just remove projects without some serious discussion, because we've already made reports to the federal agencies that we will do some of this work. So I just want to be clear when we say we can make changes. Yes, we can, but there are qualifications to the changes that we are able to make.
Understood. I just want to have the opportunity to possibly come back and look at this after the proposed budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Counselor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. At the very bottom of page 108 is the final allocations from ARPA, and the amount left unallocated is $512,653 after all of the other projects have been accounted for, including the going forward spending. So it's $512,000 balance. Is staff making recommendations on that expenditure, or are you looking for recommendations from council?
So we're not at that point yet. When we last brought forward the list of ARPA projects for council review, one of the directions we got was the council's preference to finish the projects that we had already approved. A number of them have had budgets change and evolve over time before getting to the point of seeing what balance was left and what we wanted to do with it. So it's possible that some of these budget numbers may move up or down as we're nearing completion on those projects, and once we get closer to completion, whatever balance we have left over, we would bring back to the council to talk about what's the appropriate use of whatever that balance might be. So no recommendations at this point.
So just to follow up then, that's probably going to come through sometime after the budgeting.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. My hand. So, quick question on the recruitment for the DEI committee. I get that we do recruitment for all of our committees. None of them have a special funding mechanism. We do it out of our general fund. This one apparently has a special funding mechanism for it. Are we paying the same amount for recruitment when we're recruiting for the DEI, or are we paying extra to recruit for the DEI?
First of all, I believe that we should use the term recruitment et al. Or recruitment and other things. Recruitment is one of the things. It's more of a miscellaneous as needed. Do we need pens? Do we need a pad of paper? Do we need other things? One of the larger expenses would be $100 for an advertisement, for example, which will go to recruitment. But there could be other expenses. I don't believe that there's any additional cost. It's the same advertising. Is that correct, Noel, as there would be for any other?
The only reason we would run an ad, let's say in the newspaper for more than 30 days is sort of the standard for most committees. The only reason we would run something really more than that is if we hadn't received any applicants, but that's sort of few and far between. But yes, I would agree. Or if there's going to be a particularly long meeting where maybe lunch would need to be brought in, or dinner, or something of that nature. Does that make sense?
It does. I just want to make sure I understand correctly what you're saying. We're not spending any more to recruit for the DEI than we are for any other committee.
Absolutely not.
Any other questions? Okay. So do I have a motion to consider Resolution 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Counselor Geary, a second from Counselor Cunningham. Any additional questions? Comments? Nope. Claudia?
Counselor Cunningham?
Aye.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Nay.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Nay.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Aye.
And Resolution 2025-08 passes by a vote of 3-2.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to consider the first reading with possible second reading of Ordinance 5158. Does any counselor have any reason to declare or recuse himself? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call on City Attorney David Leitenberg to do the first reading of the ordinance. And can we read the ordinance by number only? You want to hear the whole ordinance?
No.
Okay.
I thought it was like name, not just
Title.
Title.
Title, sorry.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 5158, an ordinance authorizing amendment of 1978 lease with the United Methodist Church of McMinnville, allowing for its termination upon 60 days' notice and waiving the city's right of first refusal to purchase the property.
Any discussion? Questions?
I guess I do have a question about it. The idea is that they want to develop that land ultimately at some point, and I'd assume because they fall within the historic downtown district, there is no parking standards that would fall within that development. Do we have the ability to tack on some parking?
If I'm correct, for what we have on the table right now, that doesn't apply to this at this point. That would be further when the development came in front of the Planning Commission?
That's correct. We're not considering the development at this time.
Okay. Yep.
Just the
I
the
understand where you're
changing of
going,
the
but-
lease.
Okay, so did we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, any seconds?
Sorry, may I clarify, since there hasn't been a lot of talking? This is a motion to accept the first reading and possibly pass to a second reading?
That's what I meant, yeah.
Okay, Counselor Geary, do I have a second?
Second.
Counselor Peralta? Claudia?
Counselor Cunningham?
Abstain.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Did you hear what he said?
I didn't.
Chris, can you repeat yourself? Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Aye.
And the first reading passes unanimously by a vote of 4-0.
So we can move on to a second reading, even with the abstain?
Oh,
Can we do it with the abstain?
There is no vote.
Make him think.
Yeah.
I think we can.
It was indeed unanimous because of
Yes,
the
I
abstention.
think we can, but I just wanted to make sure. Good job. Okay.
So are you asking me to read it the
I
second
am.
time? This is the second reading of ordinance number 5158, an ordinance authorizing amendment of 1978 lease with United Methodist Church of McMinnville, allowing for its termination upon 60 days' notice and waiving the city's right of first refusal to purchase the property.
Do I have a motion?
I would move to approve ordinance 5158 as read.
Counselor Geary, do I have a second?
Oh.
Counselor Peralta? Claudia?
Counselor Cunningham?
Aye.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Aye.
And ordinance number 5158 is adopted.
Thank you. It's 9:11 and I adjourn the council meeting.